Okay. So anyway, back to the problem at hand. You like I said, my analogy was, you got to get money, but you don't want to work, and you just can't figure your way out of this paper bag. What do? I really don't want to work, but I really need money, and I'm really frustrated. And okay, so the answer is you just have to develop a work ethic, and that's it. That's it. Okay, so the same problem. Okay, we don't want to have any kids for X number of reasons, whatever, but we don't want to do NFP because it's way oversold and it's lame for X number of reasons. So what do we do? And the answer is, if you had $100 million in your checking account and all the grace available, what would you do at that point? What's your answer?
Well, I asked my wife if I made $1 million this year, if we could have another baby, and she said no. And I said, well, about two, and no, and she said five. She hesitated. So,
okay, so this is a feminist thing. She's the one who doesn't want any more kids.
Well, she's the one that does the hard work, John. The last pregnancies have been really tough, like really difficult.
Okay, so yeah, this is classic stuff where it's typically. It's just this feminist stuff. This is part of why marriage is like dead. The wives don't want to have kids, so they create a new purpose of marriage, and then the men try to rise to that occasion, but that's not a natural purpose, so they just fail because they're caveman lunkheads who can't speak their love language and all this other stuff. And so then she bails. Did you watch that last video I did about the French Revolution thing?
Part of it, I didn't get through all.
Okay, so the very end of it was great because there's this. I was trying to find some French songs that would be relevant, and this girl in France is singing all about how her heart is like majorly broken, and she's just super mad, and she's super sick, and she's giving her heart to the blah blah blah. In other words, when women feel super scorned or whatever, they don't care about any old stuff. They don't care about the law, and so the point is that when they have to be, everyone's got to get put into reality. Just like when a cop tries to arrest somebody and they're freaking out, the cop's like, okay, shut up. We're putting the cuffs on you, and that's it. Sorry about your feelings. We've got to get normal here. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. You've heard that phrase. So point I'm saying is that everyone needs to get on the page of what marriage is in the contract. If you got to work, she's got to have kids. That's it. So if she doesn't want to have kids, then you got to. It's celibacy. That's what it is. It's complete abstinence. Because
why is that?
Because the purpose of the conjugal act is procreation, and if you go to Casti 59, it says Well, hang on. Let's back up a second. I know exactly what the answer is. The NFP is a sin per Casti 59, the first paragraph, because it says you can tolerate the perversion of the right order, but only if it's natural. In other words, if your spouse is into onanism, that can be tolerated because it's, quote, natural. But it's a sin, and you have to tell them you can't do this. You can never tolerate artificial contraception at all for any reason at all, but you can tolerate what is natural. So it's been said, and I agree, that NFP is just female onanism. It's just withdrawal female style, that she's keeping the fertility away using timing, and that's all Onan did. He used timing. So in Casti, it says you can tolerate that sin, but you have to tell the other person this is a sin. Okay, so you got to try to stop this. And this is that was from also the same answer from the Apostolic Penitentiary in 1853 or whatever. They're like, if they can't stop, you got to try to. If they can't stop onanism, you're allowed to do this. It's all the same thing. So to try to, I'm talking a ton. I'm sorry, but to try to.
Oh, so let's. I know we're getting an echo too. What if we had let doctor said if she gets pregnant again, she's going to die. How does that change the analysis, if anything?
It doesn't.
So
Because
she's just got to get pregnant and die. That's what you're saying.
wait a minute. Doctors say all kinds of stuff. There's lots of examples of where they say that.
Hold on. Let's just assume we can deal with hypotheticals. Let's say hypothetically, she will die if she gets pregnant again. What?
Fine. Then the answer is zero relations
Why?
because there's a chance of a baby with relations. And if you're going to die if you get pregnant, then the answer is no, because you're basically committing suicide. Just like no.
Oh, okay. So you would say,
But nobody, that hypothetical doesn't exist in reality. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, sure it does. I mean, there's definitely people that die during childbirth. I mean, it still happens.
Yes, but no one says there's 100% chance if you have a baby you're going to be dead. No, that's no.
But there's no way to find out. I mean, I mean, I'm not playing Russian roulette with my wife's life. I mean, that's insane if that's the standard. Well,
no one's suggesting playing Russian roulette at all.
I mean, at our age, every time we get pregnant, the risk of a serious complication goes up. The last pregnancies have had serious complications.
Then listen. So if you have judged that there's a serious reason to not have a baby, then you don't do what creates babies. That's it. Now, if you really have a serious reason, then you don't. You don't do the act. But if you do use NFP, that's just proof you don't have a serious reason because you're like, well, we're letting God be in control. Listen, I'm telling you that God obviously knows what he's doing as far as planning goes, providence, everything. He's got plenty of money, plenty of grace, more than you could ever use. So the point I'm saying is, rather than managing God and his expectations and how you're going to do things, you let God give you all the money and grace he needs to give you, okay? Don't shortchange. So this is your solution, I'm saying. It's like jumping off a cliff, all right? Into the darkness. That's what's going on. None of this management stuff. This is what Protestants do. They manage through redefining things and contraception. We got to pill.
I mean, can't God bypass? I mean, God's God, right? I mean, we've gotten pregnant when we shouldn't have been able to get pregnant because ovulation was wacko. I mean, God can get us pregnant anyway. Like, so don't you think it's a little weird for us to say that God, the creator of the universe, can't make us get pregnant even if we're not trying to? Like, God's not bound by the laws of biology. Why what's our response to the question of, well, God will make us pregnant if he wants us to get pregnant, whether we're using NFP or not?
What's your response? What's my response?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, pregnancy happens, but if the sin of contraception is it's a perversion of ends. You're overturning the hierarchy. So you can't do that is the point. Now, this whole conversation is happening because your wife doesn't want to have the kids.
No, it's a joint decision. I mean,
okay. So if she was like, I want 5 more kids what would you say?
If she wanted more kids and she really wanted to, I would find a way.
Okay, so how many kids more does God want?
I think 0. I think we have.
You think 0. Now, could you be wrong about that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you don't know, and if you're playing God, in other words, at this point, God doesn't say you need to decide. It's all about nature, man. You can't. There's a reason why.
Let's suppose God wants us to have one more child. Is God going to be able to do that if we just become celibate as opposed to engaging in NFP?
Yeah, God could make pick elephants fly, but
right.
but no, he's not. No.
So, which is more likely to give God an opening to give us a 10th child if that's what God wants? NFP or celibacy? I mean, it seems kind of obvious to me, but
yeah, it does. That's right. But like I said, NFP is violating your frustrating nature because there's a real purpose there. But with feminism, we have a new purpose now. You've got two competing purposes, in fact, because you have procreation. This is why you have, this is the inherent frustration. The purpose is the procreation, but now the purpose is also interpersonal relationship. And those aren't always identical. If everyone wants 27 kids, then everything's cool. But when there's some sort of diversion, and 99% of the time it's the wife going, whoa, whoa, can't do this. Now you have the conflict and you've got the problems. So you have to go back to the owner's manual. What's the deal? No frustrating the primary end. But we have a new primary end now. See? Like I said, we could get into the weeds on some other stuff, but my overall comment about some of your latest 10 videos about this frustration thing is the man has to do what God. In other words, don't go like Adam and just try to go, yes, dear, what are you trying to do here, or whatever. I'm not suggesting you're doing that, but I'm saying do what's right and don't take any prisoners on that. And again, don't worry about how you feel or how much money. God, with there's plenty of grace available and plenty of money, so that comes with God takes care of this stuff. All right, but bottom line is, you use NFP, you're not going to heaven. So there's the stick right there. Nothing funny about it. It is what it is. Either NFP, you go to heaven with it, or you go to hell with it, and that's what you do. You don't go to heaven with it. You can't.
I will say this, John. If you're right, I think most Catholics are going to hell, not just the ones using NFP, because I don't think anyone's getting to heaven if you're right about everything.
Okay, so you have to follow your conscience. You also have to be informed, and if there's a ton of people that don't know any better, and you see what I'm saying? So
yeah, ignorance is bliss. Yeah, ignorance is bliss. I tell you.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people do know. You know, when you're doing something that's not right, just naturally there's guilt there unless you kill your conscience. So you do sin enough, you get stupid. And that's another thing I worry about with you a little bit, because you're getting more and more uncharted, not more and more charted, bro. And this stuff about like divine law, the marital debt is not of divine law. That's just nuts. No, it wasn't created by, what did you say, frustrated celibate men or something? Marital debt's in the Bible. But if all this,
it's not. I mean,
okay, yes,
do not defraud. You have one sentence from the New Testament that doesn't say marital debt.
In fact, it does say the word debt in the Bible, and you have to go to the Douay Rheims. But
okay,
and that's not funny either. There's nothing funny about
John, it. John, it's okay. You can laugh a little bit. God's got a sense of humor too. Okay, it's okay.
No, but there's just nothing funny there. That's like it's like your what's the word? Not mocking, but when you laugh when people say something that's not funny, it's kind of like derisive. Okay, so
I think it's funny, and you don't think it's funny. Who judges?
Why is divine law regarding marital debt funny?
No, the reference to the Douay Rheims, like we have to go to the Douay Rheims to get it right.
Where's the humor there at all?
Well, the Catholic Church obviously approves other versions of the Scripture.
Okay, so yeah, but why is that? Why is it funny to say you have to go to the Douay Rheims?
I just think it's funny that you the only way you can support your position is to use one version of the Scripture as opposed to another version of the Scripture.
No, it's not the only reason, but the Douay Rheims is the most clear because it takes the original language, and the New American Bible and all that stuff, they shift around a lot of things. They change stuff to fit the new religion, the new morality. But the Douay Rheims, you can't get around some of that. That's why it's important to check with the Douay Rheims.
Are you a sedevacantist yet, John?
What do you think the answer is?
I assume you are, but the last time I talked to
you assumed I am? What are you talking about?
Well, by your question, I assume you are, but by your answer, I assume you are. But the last time I think we talked, I don't think you were. So I was curious if something has changed.
Of course not. No, because there's no salvation in SSPX or sedevacantism.
See, that makes you that makes you a very.
You're just divorcing your church because you don't like what's going on. It's just no. I go to Novus Ordo and grit my teeth, man. It's bad.
Yeah, well, you're out west there. Probably worse than it is here.
No, it gets crazy, bro. I don't
Yeah.
go on Sundays to Nova sort of. I mean, if I have no choice, but I put in earplugs and then I also wear my chainsaw earphones over that, and I close my eyes and I'm in the back, and you don't know I'm on another planet, and I got my Magnificat and that's it. So, at any rate, man.
Well, hey, can I? Are you okay? I'm very curious to better understand your perspective. I'm very curious about your background. Are you okay talking a little more about your background and how you got to where you are, 2025, John Farrell?
I guess
And you stop me anytime you don't want to talk about it.
well, yeah, I don't really talk about it a lot because it's kind of not here nor there, and it's kind of a side thing. But no, I'm just a regular guy who got married. What do you want to know?
Well, yeah, I'm a former traditionalist. I'm not a traditional anymore, and I think that.
Okay, so I grew up in the
Nova.
Novus Ordo in Ann Arbor in the 70s. I used to ask people, are we even in a Catholic church when I was like 10? I'm like, what's going on here?
Was your family pretty Catholic or not?
Yeah, we're like typical 50s Catholic with 9 kids, right?
Okay.
And then people
your
started
parents had a
listening to
big
the
family.
Beatles and getting freaky and, a little of this and a little of that. Can you dig it? And then I just grew up not knowing what the rosary was, never heard of a scapular in my life, nothing. We always
But your
went to
parents
church.
had 9 kids?
Yeah. I think in one miscarriage. And but they were like, 50s Catholics. So they didn't quite know how to handle some of the counterculture coming up, and now it's become sort of dominant culture. But at any rate, so then I just grew up in the 70s not knowing anything, really. I always went to church and stuff, but then you kind of need an identity, right? So my identity sort of became punk rock because I was like, I guess I'm Catholic, but I don't really even know what that is. But I do like the Dead Kennedys, and I saw like all the bands and, the whole thing. And so then after a while, I started realizing that because, beer and rock and roll was pretty much it. That was it. That was my main reason. And then I, 1987, I went up to Mercer Island, Washington, and learned about what the rosary was. I went to a youth group, kind of kicking and screaming, where all those holy people were at St. Monica's. And then, that summer I got the scapular and I did a lot of praying all
How old
summer.
were you? Teenager? Or
21.
Okay.
20. Then, so that whole summer kind of like revert, someone told me who the Pope was. I had no idea that there was an unbroken line of popes. Never heard that in my life. I'm like, wow.
Till
It
you're
just
20.
clicked. It's called the sensus fidelium. If you kind of have an openness to it, and the faith comes through hearing. Someone's got to tell you the truth. The people who don't want the truth, doesn't matter how good you tell it, they're like, you're out of here. They scoff. No. So if you want the truth and you hear it, it'll land. Okay, this is why you have to be open and humble and whatever. And I wasn't I was kind of open, and I guess I have a natural fear of the Lord. I had a dream when I was like 5 years old that was pretty profound about fear of the Lord. Like I just had a vision of this white presence coming down, and there was like nowhere to hide, and it was serious.
Even though your family wasn't like super Catholic when you were.
Well, we were on the surface super Catholic. There wasn't like massive rosaries going on or anything. We prayed a rosary or twice, maybe. I didn't even know what daily mass was. I had no idea that there was such a thing as daily mass. My mom said, for your punishment, you're going to go to mass on Wednesdays and Tuesdays. I was like, wow, I had no idea. I was in college.
Okay.
I was a Eucharistic minister, but I had like super crazy hair and it's dyed black. And they're like, we don't care. You can be a Eucharistic minister.
I want pictures now, John.
So then I just got married.
How old were you when you got married?
29, I think.
Oh, so you were a little older, but not.
Yeah, because I'm like a late bloomer. I was just a freaking dork, And like I said, we opened for Nirvana in Texas, and then they came up to Seattle, and I was like, wow, there's 6,000 people here. Because I met all those guys at the bar when I was playing. It's like they just rocked the house.
What's your instrument?
Drums.
Okay. All right.
So they just rocked the house down, and I thought these guys are going to go somewhere. That was probably 1988, something like that.
Okay.
87, 88. So then I met my wife, and she's from 9 kids, and she's 24. Everything's checks out. Yes, call him. Everything's like cool, right? Totally cool. Daily mass. What could go wrong? And then she starts getting into the NFP stuff too.
So when you first got married, you just didn't use.
I have no
anything,
idea. So I called my friend. He goes, "Yeah, you're supposed to have kids when you get married." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I mean, that was it. We didn't know.
No contraception or anything. That just you
No
were
way.
just doing
No way,
Well,
dude.
I
Are you
don't-
kidding? Yeah,
Okay.
no. But I then this NFP stuff started coming up. I'm like, okay, I don't know. What is it? And then she's like, oh, it's the coolest. And
How many kids did you have? Did you have some kids already before you started using it?
I think after the first baby, she's like, yeah, it's NFP time. I'm like, whoa. Oh, okay.
Did you have your first one like relatively short after you got married then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then then one day I went to an Opus Dei retreat and I got some books and they're like, yeah, there's marital debt and this, and I was like, oh, I had no idea. I've never heard any of this in my life ever, So,
you came home and told the missus about the marital debt then?
yeah, she didn't like that very much at all. I don't think.
It's all a presentation, John.
No. Yeah, that's what they say. It's not what you say. It's just how you say it. I'm like, no. Yeah, it's not. It's just okay. So she just kind of started looking over the fence, and everyone's got daddy issues these days, don't they? And maybe even mommy issues. So she just decided blowing up the family was the secret, the trick, the thing to do. And
was she then? I mean, you can stop me wherever you.
Well, we're trying. Go. Well, not to, because I could talk for 5 hours. We're going to try to bring in for a landing.
I mean, I'm genuinely interested in this because I think it'll help me better understand where you're coming from. So then, how many kids did you end up having?
5.
Okay, so despite the NFP, you still managed to have 5 kids. Is that basically?
That's exactly right. Despite the NFP, that's right. So it was NFP all the time, a lot.
And how did you enjoy the NFP?
You could fill in the blank. It's guys don't. It's dumb. It's like, yeah, you got like I don't know, 3 days a month window. That's it.
Drag.
That's it. No, and I'm like, I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, well, the church approves it. It must be okay, right? That's what everyone says, right, dude? And no, so then it just. I think it even says in Casti Connubii, it says you do this kind of stuff, your wife turns into a prostitute, and you turn into a paramour. That's what's going on, because you're not having honest relations with the honest purpose. It's the new purpose, which is what? It's just flesh, man. That's it.
Did you propose just becoming celibate to her?
No, I didn't really think it through. Like most guys, there's just sort of normal rock and roll Catholics, doing their thing. It's like, I got to work, bro. I got a lot going on. Okay. You know what it is.
What do you mean work in what
Custom
way?
tailor. I got to sell suits, man. And I got a lot I'm taking care of the kids, mowing the lawn, doing everything, remodeling the whole house, just all sorts of stuff. I had a stroke in 2006, I think. This is some stress, man. But anyway, I forget where I was going with that, but
well, okay, so
NFP is not cool. Go ahead.
She's basically imposing NFP on you against your will.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, but I didn't know any better. Like I didn't know this isn't. You don't know what your rights are because no one tells you anything. They just say simp harder, more sacrifice. Then you start realizing it's like, no, like Adam and Eve. Adam should have just told Eve, hey, you're going to go kicking and screaming, sorry, we're not eating the apple.
Okay, so what are you saying? What are you saying you should have done?
I should have ramped up on, figured out about, it's too hard to get the information because no one can tell you anything about NFP or divorce or separation or the marriage contract because nobody will talk about it. So you have to basically go into the monastery like me for 10 years to figure it out, which I've done, okay? But what would I have done if knowing what I know now, I would have said, we're going to, this is a sin. NFP is a mortal sin. You go to hell if you use it. It can be tolerated by the innocent spouse, but I'm telling you this is a mortal sin. And I may have decided to become completely no relations, probably, because it's like, what are we doing this for? I probably would have done that. I also would have said, you can't divorce. That's a mortal sin too. You can't. And you have to go to the bishop first if you're going to do that, because they have to hear the marriage case. But nobody knew anything. And she handed me my divorce papers and she goes, I would never do this if I thought it was a sin. 7 a.m., kitchen table, kids weren't awake yet. And I'm like, I don't know if it's a sin. I guess divorce. I don't know. What? And I talked to the priest. He goes, "We don't recognize divorce," and he walked away and wouldn't. And then after that, like never talk again. Like no more words. No one will talk. This is
And do you attribute the NFP fight to the sort of breakdown of your relationship then, or I mean, I don't. You don't need to tell us.
okay.
But I'm just
So it
curious.
wouldn't matter if I was Saint Joseph and I was perfect. She still, because people don't. Sometimes women just don't like marriage. Like Jordan Peterson says. You ever seen that video, The Shackles of Marriage? You ever seen that? It's really good. It's 4 minutes long. Really good. Because he says marriage is about, you have to know the truth about the other person or yourself, and you're shackled together so you can't escape. And if you can't escape, you will have, the person's going to figure you out and tell you what's going on about yourself. People don't like that because if there's a part of you that you don't want exposed or you don't want to talk about, typically it's from emotional damage when you're 3 or 5 years old, right? And you just bury that. That's a lot of people. There's a lot of wounded people, and they become narcissists. That's what they do. They control other people, and they suck off other people rather than getting healed from this deal. That's why they say, lay down on this couch, tell me about your childhood. That's what you got to comb through, okay? So at any rate, when marriage started getting too real, it's like, this is why I'm saying, instead of finding the human solution, you reach to God and you jump off the cliff. That is the Catholic solution. That's it. In all cases. So family planning is a human solution. That's why it's Casti Connubier. It says there can be no human law that truncates or circumscribes the fertility.
Let me just step back a little bit for just a moment. I want to just set Casti Connubi and stuff aside for a moment. My understanding, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, my understanding is that Aquinas felt, because you use the term nature a lot, right? About nature of marriage, nature of the conjugal act, etc. My understanding is Aquinas felt that nature, natural law, when it pertains to this stuff, is something that can be known through reason. Even the reasonable atheist can understand these principles. Don't need to have a God telling them these principles.
Okay.
Is that correct? And do you agree with that?
Yeah. If St. Thomas Aquinas says it,
I think that's more or less. But
yeah,
I mean,
I haven't really dove into that super hard or anything, but I totally believe it. Sure, you can use reason and logic to get there. Why do you ask?
well, I'm just so when we talk about, let's say, the purpose of the conjugal act, do you think you can know the purpose of the conjugal act from reason and observing nature with or without the assistance of divine revelation?
I'm sure you can. Yes, and I think that's kind of why everyone sort of knows it. But then again, with a little intellectual decoy and stuff, and you can talk yourself into all kinds of stuff if you really want to. Okay, people can say abortion is natural if they think really hard about it. Okay, you know what I mean? It's like
Well, do you think natural law isn't really possible then? That natural law, independent of like divine revelation, doesn't exist?
Of course it exists, and that's why it's called the Aboriginal magisterium and all that stuff. People just know right and wrong, and they
Yeah.
always have, and they always will because of human nature.
Yeah,
Um,
and I actually, I think I more or less ascribe to that idea. So let me ask you this then. So do you think, you and I have both been married. We've both born children, produced children. We've been through the uh, love triangle of NFP, right? Do you think that Thomas Aquinas, a celibate man, is in a better position to understand the nature of the conjugal act than you or I?
doesn't matter.
Well, it's a yes or no. Do you think he was better able? He's in a better position than you or I to understand from a rational perspective.
I would think so. Yeah, the guy's got serious grace. Okay,
Oh,
and
okay. So, that involves God, and that's
yeah,
not
he's
just
he's
reason.
yeah. A policeman can know a lot more about crime than a criminal, even though he's not stealing stuff. It's just so priests. That's just when people say that, I don't like it. When they say priests don't know what it's really like. No, they can't combine. They can't talk about it. It's about logic, reason, truth. And those who are most in tune with reality can deal with it. If it's like I said, sin makes you stupid. And so when you start looking at stuff that's objectively sinful and you're like, well, maybe, you're giving yourself a lobotomy is what you're doing.
Could sin have made Thomas Aquinas stupid in some things?
Sin can make any person stupid.
Hmm.
And there's not evidence that he was really sinful and stupid.
I mean, I'm genuinely curious about this is something I pondered whether a virtuous person is better able to exercise the use of reason than let's say a non-virtuous person. It seems to me it's an intellectual exercise more than a moral exercise.
Okay, so yeah, there's when it's slavery, sin is slavery. So if you want to be able to run around the room, you want to be free to do it. If you want to be able to intellectually consider things, you want to be free to do that. But if you're boxed in by your notions, preconceived notions, and that keeps you from being open to truth, because truth is going to knock over your structure of sin that you've created. So it's like when you show aborted baby pictures to the abortionist, does not compute. He's not going there because he's not free to consider it, because it's going to destroy his status quo. So we're not talking about that. You ever meet people who say, I'm sorry, we're not talking about this. This conversation is over. They're not free for the truth because they're holding on to some sin, something they want, something that's not right. That's a sign right there. Okay. At any rate, go ahead.
So, do you think that? Let me try and ask it this way. Why do humans have a desire for sexual relations even when procreation is not possible, whether it's during pregnancy?
It's just natural
menopause?
instinct. God wants kids so bad that he makes it such that people are going to want to do that, and he just creates the fertile window, and that's what's going on. I mean,
And what's
I
your
don't know.
basis for that? I mean, I'm just curious.
What's my basis for what?
basis for saying the reason why God gave us a sex drive above and beyond what's necessary for procreation? What's your basis to say that's just God's way of really trying to make us make babies? Is there some source for that? Intuition?
No, are you trying to say that there's more than one natural purpose and we have to recognize that? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
No, I mean, when my wife is pregnant, our desire for sexual union doesn't stop, right? And my question, and that includes her, more so for me, but for her, why is that? Did God design it that way, or do you think that's a defect from original sin?
Well, I guess you could say that. Yeah, there's concupiscible appetite, and once original sin happens, things kind of change, of course. So there can be desire for more food when you don't need it, okay? But people just always want to eat. You know, they always want cheesecake at midnight, but no, we're not doing that, okay? It's not cool, all right? Or whatever. They want one more glass of wine, you know. So this is where civilization occurs and is elevated by truth. So you need the Catholic Church to say what's what. You can get close and you can hit it pretty good, but you need if there's some splitting of hairs on stuff. What do we do? The Church is infallible on faith and morals, so whatever they say, that's it. God said it through the Church. That's it. But without humility, it's like fear of the Lord. You're in trouble.
Yeah, I'm genuinely interested in whether this stuff is something that can be knowable by reason, which is, I think, let me finish. My understanding is Aquinas and natural law, teleology philosophers say this basic stuff about nature can be known through human reason. You don't even have to know God exists to be able to figure this stuff out. Or if it's stuff that we can only figure out through divine revelation, or the church, the popes having some sort of a mystical appreciation of truth, that's one thing. I can accept that. Where I struggle, and I'm just telling you, my own personal struggle is where it seems that we're obligated to accept one person's, non-infallible person's, perspective of just nature from a human reason perspective that's supposed to be knowable without recourse to God, when it doesn't necessarily
Can you
seem
say that in
obvious.
like 10 words, man?
No, that's as good as I can do.
One person's non-infallible. What are you talking about? St. Thomas Aquinas?
Sure,
What are you
Thomas
talking about?
Aquinas, right?
What are you trying to get at? That natural law is I'm trying to like what are you really trying to say? Like what's your main issue? Natural law isn't real?
Well, no, I think my issue is it seems that we've essentially adopted, let's say, Thomas Aquinas's perspective of natural law, even though when it comes to natural law,
Okay, it sounds
he's
like
just
sorry,
another
you're
person.
you're trying to justify family planning. That's the bottom line. That's what you're doing. That's what you're trying to do. And you're saying, well, St. Thomas Aquinas, who's fallible, he's all about it, so I can have a different view, a different feeling, or whatever. He operates within church teaching. He quotes the Bible and the saints. Okay, but nonetheless, even if there was no St. Thomas Aquinas at all, the primary purpose is procreation, and there ain't no other. It's in divine law from Scripture.
Okay, I'll grant you that. I'm willing to accept that divine law through Scripture says that. I just disagree that it's clear from natural law that that's the way it is.
Fine, be unclear. It's like you want to go to heaven. It's not rocket science. It might be hard, but it's not confusing. You just you want to escape the devil, humility, obedience. Those are the two ways. You play around with those, you're playing with fire, because he's obviously way smarter than all of us, and he doesn't sleep. And he can confuse anybody.
Including Thomas Aquinas.
Of course, but Thomas Aquinas is a doctor of the church, and Jesus appeared to him and said, "You've written well of me." It's like,
did anyone see that, or was that Thomas Aquinas' account?
It's on video. They captured it.
They got a video back in 1242?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. So imitate the lives of the saints. Don't be a scoffer on saints, okay? The saints, dude, they blow everybody away to the max. So
who's to say you and I won't be saints someday?
okay, everyone who goes to heaven is a saint. Anyone who gets to heaven is a saint. You have to be a saint to get to heaven. Have to. That's all that's there.
You and I, hopefully, at least still have the possibility of
if you got your scapular on, you're going. If you take it off, you're not, okay? So you have to, then you do your prayers. But even if you don't do your prayers, if you die with it on, you're going to heaven. Purgatory is a different topic, but so if you live a life of sin, you're going to take it off. You won't have it on at death. Mary won't let you have it on at death. It's going to come off. Now, back to, I guess, my original theme, because we could talk all night, is, and you got to go and I got to go. It's she has to be told, or any spouse that wants to do NFP, it's sinful. It can be tolerated by the innocent spouse. But I'm saying instead of this human solution, putting kind of God in a box, you have no idea around the corner how much grace is available, and then you also begin with the end in mind. When it's time for your particular judgment, you don't want anything against God at that point. That you want to talk about having an aha experience. Think about your particular judgment. Take your last breath. Do you have anything that wasn't what per the law of the church? Do you have any unforgiveness? Do you have anything that the church says no and you said yes? So it's super straightforward that procreation is primary, and it's also that NFP is not an infallible teaching. It's a novel teaching that Pius XII pulled out of his hat in 1951. And then they couldn't do anything with it because it's a fish out of water. Procreation is primary except when it's not primary. Don't violate nature ever except when you're violating nature. So then Vatican II says, whoa, we're just going to repackage all this and it's going to be great. And everyone's off to the races.
Do you believe that the conjugal act provides no benefit to the spouses other than procreation?
Of course, it has secondary ends. Okay,
Like
but
what kind of other benefits does the conjugal act provide?
Can you ask that in a Mr. Rogers sort of voice?
I don't think I can.
What kind of other benefits do you think it can provide?
I'm
What do
working
you
on
think?
my Christopher West.
What do you
impression,
think?
but it's
Oh
bad.
man! Oh,
It's
he
bad.
said the stupidest things today. I was
Yeah,
no
okay,
part of
so
the
this is where
body,
you and
every
I
part of the
agree.
body is kissable. I'm like, oh, weirdo. God, the guy is like freaking. Oh. Dude, he said some other stuff too. I just listening to him with Matt Fradd creeps me out.
We
Like,
should just do a live stream just shitting on those guys. You and I could have a good time. I'll pour a drink and you pour a drink and
no bad words, please. I can't do that. I did bring a brewski if it got going too long. So anyway, where was I though? We were talking about what were we talking about? You were at secondary ends. Yeah. So there are secondary ends, but the secondary end is dependent on the primary. Okay, this is like basic logic 101, which is all out the window. So I did that Michael Knowles video because he's like, yeah, the primary purpose is procreation and the secondary ends are mutual help. But now nobody gives a dang what primary and secondary mean. It's just words. It doesn't mean anything. You can have.
Let me ask you this, and this is not meant to be a rhetorical question, but how do you justify the notion that procreation is the primary purpose of the conjugal act when very rarely does the conjugal act actually result in pregnancy? Like, how do you explain that?
It's not that obviously it doesn't have to produce a baby every time. It's just God's way of arranging fertility. But if he says increase and multiply, man, and that's it. So, and I think it was like I said in Tobias and Sarah, he said not for fleshly lust, but for procreation alone. And God says that's a valid marriage. That's the purpose. That's kind of where it comes from.
I mean, I totally am on board with the basic reality that the conjugal act is how babies are made. Like, I mean, I think God clearly says if you want children,
Yes,
this is how you want children.
yes.
But that's different than saying that's the primary purpose of the conjugal act.
Okay, so Onan was no problem. He's totally fine. Because what did he do? He just didn't want to have kids. What's the frickin' big deal?
Well, Onan's a whole different story. Because
No, but he overturned the hierarchy of ends.
Well, Onan is not the same situation as, let's say, a married couple that mutually agrees to do that. I'm not saying that it's right if they do that, but it's a total different situation.
Well, it's a nuts and bolts kind of thing, you might say. But the point
I mean,
is
he
that
defrauded her. He defrauded her, and I think that is, the crime of Onan.
no, he didn't defraud her. He violated nature.
Well, he defrauded her because he said, "I'll marry you and I'll give you children." And then she
Okay,
gave
so
herself to him, and he didn't give her children. So that
maybe if God didn't strike him dead, he would have eventually. I don't know, but whatever. He didn't defraud her of the conjugal act. I guess he kind of did. Whatever, dude. God said, you want the benefits, you have to do of the act. You have to do the primary purpose. That's
Where
you
did
have
he
to
say
have
that? Where does God say that?
Well, I don't know if God.
How did Onan know that it was wrong for him to do that?
I don't know if
Onan's in
Onan.
Genesis, early part of the scripture.
I don't. There's a question I've never been asked or even thought of. How did he know it was wrong?
Yeah,
I suppose he just
he knew
through
it was
natural
wrong when he
law,
was dead,
and
but-
everyone kind of knows this is for kids, and all the Old Testament people's like fertility is where it's at. That's what we're trying to do here. But God showed him, just like some people grabbed the tabernacle, grabbed the what was the tabernacle way back in the day? The
Ark of the Covenant.
Ark of the Covenant. They were just trying to be helpful. God killed him. You touch the Ark of the Covenant, boom. Same God, didn't change. Okay, so you don't mess around.
Well, okay. The Old Testament God is kind of a scary God.
God doesn't change. Same God.
Well.
So this is where fear of the Lord comes in. You don't have that. You got you're in trouble.
Well, I would call it paranoia, but whatever it takes to get you there. Let me. So
Fear of the Lord is where wisdom comes from. It's not paranoia. It's a healthy. You know who God is and you know who you are, and so you get it really super straight. That way, it keeps you out of trouble.
So if God smited Onan for pulling out. What do you think is the reason why God hasn't done the same thing to the other billions of humans in history that have done the same thing?
I guess he just he's just decided to, because God can block things. God can give people slack. There's more grace now. There's people in the Old Testament, they sinned and God opened up the earth and they all went down to hell right there. But he doesn't do that all the time now. But
doesn't it make God look a little inconsistent, though?
No, God can do whatever he wants. He doesn't do the same thing to everybody. Some people go to hell after the first mortal sin, some people after the 800th. It's just, you just never know. You don't play with it. But God blocks a lot of that. All of us deserve to be in hell right now, dead after because of mortal sin.
Well, what about a baby? A baby that's born before they sin, you think they deserve hell?
No, because they haven't done anything. But if you've committed a mortal sin, you deserve death and hell immediately. If you've committed mortal sin. Yes, sir. Exactly. It doesn't matter. But God blocks that stuff and gives people a chance, because the Bible's full of people just messing up left and right. But he's like, okay, he tries to keep calling you back, all right? Again, though, when you start deciding you want to go intellectual and I have my view and you have your view and everyone has their views, then there's no truth per se. Then you can really get yourself goofed up, and you go down a rabbit hole of, you start taking in a little bit of sin and justifying it, and you can't get. That's why I think it's kind of happening to you, because you're hanging on to that NFP and you can't make sense of it, because it's just I shouldn't say you can't make sense of it, but it's hard, and you're going to kind of keep trying to justify it. And it doesn't fit with Catholicism.
The only reason I do NFP is because total abstinence is worse for my marriage and my family. So I tolerate NFP because total abstinence is worse.
Okay, so if your wife knew it was a sin, would she do it? NFP?
No.
Okay, so that's
same reason she would never do contraception.
Okay, so it's a sin. NFP is objectively a sin. It's right there. You can prove it. It's really easy. Just if you look at 59, it's right there. And then but you have to then you have to show that they're not talking about artificial contraception. They use the word SIN for the perversion of the right order, and they're not referring to artificial contraception.
So here's what you're doing, what you accuse me of, which is not humbly submitting myself to what the church says. So I disagree. This is a situation where I will defer to Paul VI, John Paul II, the magisterium, who has very clearly, rightly or wrongly, but very clearly said NFP is permissible. You are instead saying, I know better than that, and I'm reading Casti Connubii the correct way. Maybe you're right, but you are doing exactly what you say that I do.
Rightly or wrongly? The magisterium is not right or wrong. The magisterium,
it could be on NFP.
No. Bible, it's scripture, tradition, magisterium. All three legs of the stool are infallible. Okay? There's no problem with it. They're all infallible. They can't change. But NFP is a novel, non-infallible, quote, teaching.
That's John Farrell's opinion as compared to, I would say, the overwhelming majority of popes and theologians that exist in the church today.
Okay, so just like everyone was Arian at one point, you have to use your head and think. There's a reason why NFP Inc. will not talk to me at all, because their house of cards falls apart. You start getting. Everyone knows it's Catholic contraception, except the Catholics. It's duh.
You say everyone does, but obviously not everyone does.
Nobody cares about it because it's stupid, and just there's a few JP.
It's hard. It's really hard. That's what.
And it's unnatural, man.
Well, so is abstinence. So is total abstinence.
That's not.
It is unnatural to live like brother and sister with your wife.
I think you're right. In a way, it doesn't violate nature, but it's kind of unnatural.
Both are unnatural.
Just like if you're super hungry, it's unnatural to go to Thanksgiving dinner and not eat anything. That's that's hard. It's kind of
I agree. I think it is unnatural to not have sex with your spouse. I think it is.
So
The church asks us to do something that's
okay, so
through whatever, whether it's NFP
there's
or
nothing you
abstinence.
cannot show that NFP is an infallible teaching. And
I'm not saying it is. I don't
okay, but
think
procreation primary is infallible.
where
It
does it say that?
Number one, scripture. Number two, always
Okay, scripture. What's the other one?
Tobias 8:9.
That's in the Old
But you have to go to the
Testament,
Douay-Rheims, because if you don't, they jerk it all around. You can't get there.
right? Okay, so Tobias 8:9. What's the other one?
The Council of Trent says the same thing.
No, it doesn't.
Catechism of St. Trent.
No, it doesn't.
It does, because it says, for this reason, God created marriage. And then they go on to say, if you try to not get pregnant, you're a murderer.
Where does it say that?
Catechism of Trent.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
All right.
And so there's Trent, then there's canon law throughout all of the church. Okay, then there is lots of saints who have said basically the same thing.
Look, the saints are not infallible, though.
A saint is a lot holier than you or me, so you want to go with what the saint says about this stuff. Okay,
I'm just saying
And
they're
there's-
not infallible. They can be holier than me and still be wrong.
Okay, somebody who's like, oh, saints aren't infallible, there's a problem. That's like a red flag Catholic right there. You've
Because
got
I'm stating
to
what's accurate, what's actually true. I'm accurately stating.
No, it's like discrediting every saint. Forget every saint. Don't listen to anything they say, because they're not infallible. Hey, they're super
say that.
holy, and they also, back when getting the Saint Merit badge meant a lot before Vatican II, those people, everyone knew they were a saint. They had a cult following, man. They were like healing people. It's like levitating. All right, they were to be able to say the things that St. Thomas Aquinas said in the volume that he did, in the accuracy that he did, that have stood the test of time, is just, that's supernatural. No one can write books while walking and just fill up a whole room full of books. But
Well, let's step back. Let's talk about Saint Augustine for a minute. Do you think everything Saint Augustine said was accurate about marriage?
nothing that every saint has said is accurate, except
That's all I'm saying.
Except Saint Alphonsus is. The popes have said whatever Saint Alphonsus says, you can take it to the bank. Popes have said that about him. Did you know that? Saint Alphonsus Liguori is gold. Pope said anything he said on faith and morals is true. But that's the only saint they've said that about. So Saint Augustine, whatever.
Did a pope infallibly say that everything that Saint Alphonsus is?
No. But Saint Alphonsus, yeah, there's several popes who have said whatever Saint Alphonsus says.
Did they say it in an infallible way?
I don't think so. But they're basically saying, if you're a confessor and you're trying to figure out what to do, whatever Saint Alphonsus says is right. That's
Saint
what popes.
Alphonsus said, if someone confesses the same mortal sin, I think 3 times in a year, they should be deprived of confession. Do you agree
Okay,
with that?
you can show me the quote in the context if you want, whatever.
I mean, would you agree with that if that's what
I
it
don't
says?
know. You got whatever. You needs to be looked at and figured out. But if Saint Alphonsus, whatever on faith and morals, he's the man. He just is. But as far as the saint scoffing thing or whatever, I forgot what we were really getting at. It's the magisterium. Okay, so I know procreation primary. Where does it come from? It comes from the Bible. It comes from saints. It comes from tradition. It comes from Trent. Then all the canon law said it, and Casti Connubii was the last time it was mentioned, and that's why they
You've
say
already said Casti Connubii isn't infallible, right? You agree with that?
no encyclical, unless declared infallible, is infallible. But when they say the truth, like saints, and they all say what's been said before, it's real. When you start coming up with a novel thing, unless a pope says, like the Immaculate Conception or something, unless he says, I'm saying this infallibly, unless he says that, okay.
Yeah.
So procreation primaries is like it's done. It's baked. It's what it is.
You keep saying that, but it's not really written down anywhere. I don't think. I'm not.
I just listed the places. Trent,
Okay, so
Tobias,
put
8-9.
Let's put Tobias on the stage here. You'll have to show me because I don't see it. And I suppose this isn't the Dewey Reams. So if we have to find the Dewey Reams,
No. I'll show you right here. It's an element. I can find it.
let me see here.
I'll bring it up really quick right here. Hang on.
Okay. Well, you're doing a good work tonight, John. You're keeping me from going home to my wife, and this is like the one
Ha,
time
ha,
of the
ha.
month where we get a chance to do something. So,
Okay, so I'm trying to share my
okay,
screen. There it is. You see it. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, here, look. This is Tobias 8:9, and you can't get this only in the Douay Reams. If you try to do Tobias 8:9 in any other Bible, it jerks you around. It won't show it to you.
Okay. So where does it start? So that
And now, Lord, thou know. This is when they're getting. This is after all her other husbands have died. Okay, they were just trying to like do whatever. They weren't really trying to have kids. And now, Lord, thou knowest not for fleshly lust do I take my sister to wife, but only for the love of posterity, in which thy name be blessed forever. Tobias 8:9. So he's going to get married, not for anything, but only for the love of posterity. That's like the gold standard right there. That's what God says is a valid marriage. That's the primary purpose.
I don't see it says this is what everyone has to do. It looks like this is what Tobias does.
Okay, so God said this is the primary purpose.
Where does it say that? It doesn't say that.
Because if he's getting married only for love of posterity, and marriage is not only for love of posterity, then he can't get married and it's not valid. God would have said, whoa, Tobias.
It doesn't say that anywhere, John.
You have to use logic.
You're adding a whole lot of stuff to this that's not contained in Scripture.
I'll try to, okay, let me try to keep it really like 5 words or less. God approved of this marriage and the purpose for the marriage. If this were not Catholic, God would have said, you don't have any love in your contract, this marriage is invalid. Or
I would agree. If it said that, then that would be God's instruction.
But God's saying...
This is Tobias' prayer to the Lord. This is not the Lord instructing Tobias.
Okay, the Bible is written by God, and this is true. The Bible.
It's true that Tobias made this prayer to God. I agree with that.
But the Bible. This is God saying this is what marriage is.
That's not what it says. This is Tobias' prayer to God. You are trying to.
What did God think about? What did God think about his reason for marriage, his purpose of marriage?
It doesn't say one way or another.
What did God think about it? Do you know?
I don't know because it doesn't.
Okay, so here's the answer. He approved because God wrote the Bible. Every word of Scripture is God's will.
Well, I agree, but I think you're misrepresenting what the text clearly says. This is Tobias' prayer to God. There's nothing above and beyond that from what we can see.
Okay,
here.
so God approved of this whole marriage, and he says this is a valid marriage.
There's nothing wrong with people getting married if they just want to have kids. I'm not saying that.
What
but you're
does
saying
marriage
that's the only reason you can get married?
Does marriage require more than just love of posterity to have kids? To have validity?
I don't know. It doesn't.
You don't know. All right, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to help you out. No, it does not, because marriage is procreation alone is primary, which means it's the only thing that's essential. And when you start making other things essential, you lose the definition, which is why marriage is gone now, because you can't define the purpose anymore. It's quote unquote love, which has no legal definition, so it's infinite. This is the basis for why NFP is wrong.
Okay. What else do you got besides this paragraph that we're going to have to disagree about in Tobias?
Catholics cannot agree to disagree. They can't.
Yes, we can. We can disagree about what that actually means. It doesn't mean what it doesn't clearly say what you think it says.
Okay, what does it clearly say?
It says this is Tobias' prayer to the Lord. That's what it says.
Okay, so did God approve of what he prayed for?
Probably for him, yeah.
Probably?
Well,
no, absolutely.
Again, people can get married just to have kids.
Okay, so God defines marriage, and God defines the purpose, and God defines the essence of marriage, And if the essence requires more than posterity, you got to have it, or God's not going to allow it.
You're going to have to find other texts. This is not exclusionary. This is his prayer to God. You're going to need other support to establish the meaning that you're trying to give this one paragraph. I get what you're saying, John, but you are adding stuff to the text that I don't see there.
Well, marriage, like I said, marriage has a legal definition that can't change, and it's connected to nature and the essence.
Okay, then if it says in Scripture, let's go look at that. It doesn't say that here.
It says that he's taking his wife only for love of posterity. Would that marriage be valid today?
I don't know. I'm not a canon lawyer. I don't know.
So the answer is yes, it would.
It doesn't make it invalid if that's not the purpose, though. If that's not the way the marriage is.
But the spirit of Vatican II, your bishop would say, no, you have to have good of the spouses, and there's no good of the spouses here. There's only procreation. So Tobias wants to turn his wife into a baby machine, and he's heartless. And we need to have love now because God is love and marriage is love, and you don't want to disappoint Christopher West. So we have to have love in the mix, and this is why this stuff is out, and that's part of why. If you go to New American Bible, you can't read this. It's not there.
Well, this is the Dewey Reams you're saying?
Yeah.
Well,
and then this is an article from Christendom College, the president of Christendom College, William Marshner, and then he says, then the next paragraph, he says, exactly there is the source of the church's constant and immutable teaching that procreation is the primary end of marriage as an institution. Okay? So this is what everyone kind of knew for a long time, and like I said, if you want to go to Trent, you can look at Catechism of Trent.
Where do I go to the Catechism of Trent?
Let's see. I could probably find it here.
Yeah, if you can find it on your end, let's look at it.
I could probably find it pretty quick.
I'll just stop the sharing until you get it, and then I'll put it back.
Okay, hang on a second. Let's see. This is probably it right here. Share this tab instead and see.
Okay. Let me see here.
Okay, so it was for here. There it is, right there. It was for this reason that God instituted marriage. So they're talking about marriage and stuff in the paragraph before, which I don't have up, but it was also for this reason that God instituted marriage from the beginning. So the question is, what is the reason that God instituted marriage from the beginning? And therefore, married persons who to prevent conception or procure abortions have recourse to medicine are guilty of the most heinous crime, nothing less than the wicked conspiracy to commit murder. So for this reason, God instituted marriage. Institution, a constitution, what it is, and if you violate the reason, you're a murderer, and that is if you're preventing conception, dog, okay? Because the reason...
Abstinence prevents conception, right? Total abstinence prevents conception.
Of course not, because you're not... They say, therefore, married persons who, to prevent conception or procure abortions, have recourse to medicine. In other words, they are doing something with... They're taking the conjugal act, but they're doing something with it.
Okay, so NFP doesn't require medicine, though, right?
I know, but it is a recourse to a method to get the conjugal act without the baby. That's all contraception is. No baby, yes, conjugal act. However you want to slice it. So God gave, but if the reason for marriage is the partnership of life and love, which you've heard a ton of times, and Christopher West is all about that, it turns you into like a new age sort of Catholic weirdo. You're on this like spiritual high of cosmic grooviness of love. And then, listen to Christopher West, man. He gets all emotional and closes his eyes and starts geeking out about JP2 and all this love goofiness. You know, it's like, sorry to break the news to you. It is procreation. That is the reason. Can you see me okay?
Yep. I just have us off so that people could see the screen a little better.
Okay, so yeah, that's the reason. Got the reason, and there's that right there in Trent, because that's like I said, if you start going through the motions, geared toward no baby, nothing less than the wicked conspiracy to commit murder, which is why other saints have said the same kind of. St. Thomas Aquinas said it. Of course, there's that quote from St. Hildegard. Those who have intercourse with the pregnant are murderers because you are not doing what you're not trying to have a baby.
She was
okay,
wrong. She was wrong. She
no.
thought it actually killed the fetus.
Oh, no. She did not think it killed the fetus. Obviously not, because it doesn't.
Yeah,
no, it's because of sin. No, it's because of sin.
Inaccurate scientific information.
No.
Okay.
That is the secular scoffing explanation.
It's not scoffing. It's just acknowledging the fact that she's wrong. It's okay to be wrong, John.
Look in the mirror. Okay.
Yeah,
now,
I could be wrong too, but she could be wrong too. Hildegard,
wait a minute.
Right?
No, this is all the lots of saints have said this. They've all said the same thing. During pregnancy, the kids suffer from the punishment of the parent, the sins of the parents. So it's not that it kills the kid, but they can have leprosy and other problems because the sins of the parents are being visited on the kid. That stuff does happen and has happened, but like we talked about earlier, God blocks a lot of it, and particularly in our day and age, no one knows this stuff, so he blocks a lot of it. Okay, people are ignorant of stuff, but I'm just telling you where this comes from. So
I think we're missing each other a little bit here. So, I mean, I can't help but notice that when you read that, you always skip over with recourse to medicine. I mean, that is contraception, right? That is contraception, which no one here is disputing what the church says about contraception. What you and I disagree about is whether NFP or total abstinence also, I believe under your standard, total abstinence or NFP both violate that standard that you are giving to it. And so everyone should have a duty to have sex every day in their marriage.
No, there's no duty. There's no duty to have kids. There's no.
See, I don't understand how you can come up with that.
Okay, I'll show you where I get that. That's more Dewey Ream stuff.
I'm not saying. I mean, I'm just saying. I don't understand how you, on the one hand, hold the position you do, and also say that there's no duty to procreate. If there was a duty for a couple to procreate at a given time, then I would absolutely understand why NFP or contraception or total abstinence is wrong, because you are violating an affirmative duty to procreate a baby at one time. But if there's no duty to actually engage in the conjugal act, I don't understand how it can possibly be wrong not to engage in the conjugal act. If there's no duty to engage in it, how can it be wrong not to engage in it? That's my problem.
There is a duty to honor the marital debt. You have to honor your. That's.
Yeah, but we're not talking about couples that are. Most of the NFP couples are in agreement, like they are voluntary.
I think that I've heard lots of stories that they're not. But could you try to rephrase your question or your problem? You talk about duty. What do you mean? What are you talking about?
So, if there was an affirmative duty, let's say my wife is fertile right now. But let's say my wife was fertile, and there was a moral duty for me to get off this StreamYard and go home and make a baby with her. Let's say there was some moral duty to do that right now. By not doing that, I understand how we would be violating that moral affirmative duty to engage in it. But if there isn't an affirmative duty at any time to engage in the conjugal act, I don't understand how it could be wrong not to engage in the conjugal act if there's not a duty to do it in the first place.
There's only you have to pay the debt. So if your spouse requests, you have to pay the debt.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about spouses that are mutual
There is
agreement.
no duty to produce babies.
Okay, then I don't understand how any kind of abstinence, whether it's total or NFP,
NFP is not abstinence. NFP is a contraceptive method.
It's
NFP.
Not. The abstinence is what keeps the babies from being made.
Okay. Any type of barrier keeps babies from being made, and the barrier is time. Because listen, you've got. I only go fishing when the tide is out. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. It's like, so you're fishing on dry land, okay? Because it's all natural. Here, I got one other thing I wanted to show you. You can put my screen back on. What happened?
Okay, sorry. I was trying to put us back up there, and I messed it all up. Oh, that's what I was doing. Okay.
Okay, it's right here. This is you've heard of increase and multiply in Genesis, right? Okay, so let's go to the Douay Rheims. This is the commentary, which has been here for almost 500 years. Increase and multiply. This is not a precept, aka duty, as some Protestant controvertists would have it, but a blessing, rendering them fruitful. For God had said the same words to the fishes and the birds, who were incapable of receiving a precept. This is why there's no duty to have kids. NFP rises or falls on you have a duty to produce babies. No. There's no duty to produce babies.
No, that doesn't make sense, John.
What doesn't make sense?
How could NFP be wrong by not making babies if there's no duty to make a baby? Like I don't understand how you're trying to make this logic work. It doesn't work.
NFP is wrong because if having kids is if producing babies is a duty, there can be an exception to that. Just like in other words, it's no longer nature; it's just duty. Like skipping mass because you're sick isn't violating nature. Okay, not having babies because you have a grave cause. If it's just a duty to have babies, isn't violating nature because there's no nature to violate.
This is where I think you and I agree. I agree that the whole concept of you need a grave cause.
No, it makes no sense.
It doesn't. I agree with you there.
If NFP is natural, you don't need any cause whatsoever because there's
no duty to have babies.
There's no duty to produce babies.
God
puts things in motion and babies happen, dog. But there's no duty to make that. You just have to keep it natural if you do it. All right. Now everybody knew this until the Lambeth Anglicans in the 30s, in 1930, because in 1920 they said increase and multiply is a blessing and it's not a duty. Then in 1930 they said, whoa, we got to get our contraception justified, so we're going to call it a duty now, which means for a grave cause you don't have to do your duty. Okay, it's the same thing about missing mass. Once you take it away from nature, it's just a duty. And then Pius XII did the same thing. He was, for the first time in the history of the Catholic Church, any pope called increase and multiply a duty. Never before had that ever happened. So now
I agree with you there. I think.
Okay, so he calls it a duty. Therefore, it's no longer nature. So you want to have a baby, you want to not have a baby, it's all natural because there's no more nature involved. It's just duty, dude. So you've had 15 kids, you've done your duty. Who cares? It's like what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it right now. But at any rate, this is the reason why. This is why, like, you got to go to the Douay Rheims for stuff. Okay, so increase and multiply is not a command.
Right. Otherwise, we couldn't have celibacy, right? We couldn't have celibacy. If it was
you could. Yeah, I guess not, because everyone would have to be like having babies. So you don't have to exercise your right, but if you do exercise your right, it must be done in a natural way. But the new Code of Canon Law says not only does it have to be natural, it has to be in a human way, because that's the new purpose. So Tobias wasn't doing his conjugal act in a human manner because he's only doing it for procreation. That's not human. That's using his wife as a baby factory. Okay, you have to like really get the love going in the deep interpersonal relationship, man, or it's not true love. Okay, this is why marriage is dead today, because it can't be defined and there's no rights anymore. The guys are like, screw this. There's no rights, and then then the women are basing the relationship. That's the constitution of marriage is now love. Okay, love is the basis, the relationship, the personalist norm. So it's not Catholic anymore, and this is why there's all this trouble, and the statistics are just down. You have to get back to basics. So back to the original topic I was talking about with you. Your salvation, your solution is to abandon the modern stuff of playing God with NFP and let God give you grace and money, and you do what you're going to do, and that's it. Otherwise, you're perpetually frustrated with because you ain't doing, if you're not full on Christopher West, NFP is like freaking stupid.
That's
and it probably
terrible.
still, I would not be surprised if Christopher West got a divorce later. Not be
Well, he's
surprised.
made it to menopause now. He doesn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, but Captain and Tennille made it a long time too, because they just couldn't. Right? They did.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
So you can take this off the screen now, I guess, if you want. I got tons of graphics. I got tons of stuff to talk about. But go ahead. I'm just glad we got the echo done, taken care of.
yeah. I hear it just a little bit, but it doesn't seem to be too bothersome.
Okay.
So just so we're clear, let me just. I'm not a fan of NFP, obviously, but I've tried the total celibacy thing, and I think that's worse for myself and my marriage and my kids. So I tolerate NFP because I'm a worse person, I'm a worse dad under total abstinence than the NFP. Now, maybe everyone is different. Maybe for some people that's not that way. If there are parts of total
Craig?
abstinence that I think are easier
Craig?
than NFP.
Craig, I'm going to wet my pants. What should we do?
You want to take a break?
I have to.
Okay.
A bio break. So
Okay.
let's just do that. Hang on. Here I go. You do what you got to do.
Okay.
Can't hear you.
Okay, we're good.
There you go. Good.
So let me. I want to talk to you about something that I don't really see talked about that I wanted to get your feedback on. So one of the reasons that reasons that I feel strongly about not having kids right now isn't so much about whether we could afford it. We would probably find a way. It would be a great hardship for us, and not even so much that I'm confident my wife would die, but she would definitely be at risk for some serious outcome. But I have a duty to the kids that I have, not just to provide for their physical well being, but to provide for their spiritual well being. And I have observed, as a father of 9, my failure to be there at key parts of my kids' lives and development because my wife and I were immersed in the task of taking care of young children. Young children just take so much more energy, and so the teenagers have sort of
Okay.
slipped through the cracks. Just let me finish. I'm not making excuses here. I genuinely worry about my ability to get the kids that I have to heaven if we added one more child to our mix. That is real. That is legit. Okay. And I think that's something that people ought to at least be able to take into consideration.
So I guess the ideal way then is just to have one kid so you could totally focus. Okay, it's all you have to think. Uh, like Lisa Simpson when she worked for Apple Computer. Think differently. You know, it's like God wants faithfulness, not necessarily success. So when you are carrying your cross, when you're living the Christian life, that's the best teacher, okay? Rather than trying to tweak things to get God's ways are not our ways. So it's counterintuitive. This is why I say you jump off the cliff. Look at how Obi-Wan Kenobi dealt with Darth Vader. He didn't fight. He just held up his lightsaber, boom, because he knew he was going to win that way. You win by losing, okay? So don't try to control the stuff. Have the kids. God will give the grace. The grace flows through you. You're the spiritual head, all right? So you don't want to cut anything off. If you're doing anything that God doesn't approve of, like NFP, careful. So this is why I say you want that. You don't want anything in the way of that grace. And those kids can be saints. If dad's a saint, that really helps. You know what I mean? So,
but you would obviously approve of me just becoming a celibate man, right?
I doubt it because I don't. All this stuff about God knows what He's doing as far as menopause. I mean, He designed the whole thing. Nowadays, the medical establishment is careful, careful, careful. C-sections, wear your mask, all this crazy stuff, man, because they're afraid of reality, truth, and letting God be God, okay? So they try to control everything. So God knows when He wants complications and not, and you have no idea, man. So don't plan anything. Don't plan anything like that.
But God gave us reason, right? I mean, we're not just. I think there's an element of sloth and presumption there to say, I can't control anything. Everything that happens to me is because of God, good or bad. I mean, we're not just passive creatures here. God gave us reason to be used, I think. Don't you think that?
Of course, yes, but you don't do that. That's what contraception is for. You help God with the planning. Because you're like, no, God would want me to use my reason, and so reason dictates that we got reasons A, B, and C why a new baby wouldn't be good right now, so we're going to use contraception. That's all that's going on. But like I said, God, you got to think dynamically with God. God can do all sorts of things. He has designed marriage to. She has kids, you work, menopause, it's over. That's the design. God didn't mess it up. God knows what He's doing, and you know, if you have, like I said, if there's 100% chance, this crazy weird thing you came up with, that your spouse will die if she has a baby, then you go abstinence because you can't take that chance. It's like if you have a 1% chance that you put a gun to your head and pull the trigger, it might kill you. Would you do it? No. So why would you take a 1% chance on NFP failing? No. You go zeros, but nobody has the serious. There are no. If you say you need a serious reason, there are no serious reasons. If there were, they wouldn't do NFP. It's like you wouldn't. Like I said, you wouldn't play Russian roulette, except for a serious reason. You know, no. That's just my overall theme, man. It's serious Catholic means faith is when there ain't no, you have to jump off that cliff into the darkness. That's where the faith is.
I think recklessness is still an issue. I think it feels a little presumptuous to me.
Responsible parenthood is a Planned Parenthood phrase. Responsible parenthood is it's total Planned Parenthood. So don't be reckless, but if you unless you have a reason why there can't be another baby, you can't tweak. You can't use a method to try to get what you want without the baby.
I'll give you credit for the fact that, and if on a practical level, that if you have a very serious reason, NFP, you probably shouldn't be using it because it can fail. I'm just not persuaded that there's a moral issue there. If you could do it.
Well, if procreation isn't primary, there's no moral issue. If love is the reason for marriage, if there's more than one primary purpose, which doesn't make any sense. If the essence of marriage isn't necessarily procreation, then contraception is fine. That's why the Birth Control Commission in the 60s said if NFP, then AFP.
Well, I think that I think it's important to distinguish between the purpose of marriage and the purpose of every conjugal act. I think you tend to treat those as though they're interchangeably, and I don't think they are. My marriage is about more than the conjugal act. There's lots of things that we do.
Your marriage can be about all sorts of things, but it does have a legal definition. And the conjugal act that's used for not the essential purpose is sin. That's why fornication is sin. That's why contraception is sin. That's why onanism is sin, because you're using the conjugal act for a non-legal purpose, which is also a non-natural purpose.
I would simply add to that list then that abstinence, total abstinence, is sinful to the extent that it is thwarting the primary purpose of that marriage, which is to produce children.
There's no duty to produce. There's no.
I agree, but see, I think you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. I think what you're under your analysis, I don't think you can defend total abstinence. I don't think you can. I think you have a blind spot, and I think you're ignoring the logical problem that you have there.
Okay, so yes, you can defend total abstinence because you don't. There's no obligation to exercise your right.
Exactly.
To the debt,
Same thing with natural family planning. There's no duty to engage in it. So it can't be sinful.
There's no duty to engage in the conjugal act. So it doesn't. But as long as you're not doing anything to thwart the purpose
of what?
The conjugal act.
Okay, but you're
what
not
is the legal purpose of the conjugal act?
I don't know if there is one.
You don't. What does the church say is the legal purpose of the conjugal act?
Well, I don't know if it talks about purpose, but it talks.
It
about,
does. It says it's the contract.
Well, it talks about ends. I think I'm just the terminology.
No, the contract of marriage is the right over the body for acts suitable for the generation of children.
No, you say that's a definition of marriage.
That's the right over the body for acts. That's the conjugal act, suitable for the generation of children, not suitable for the generation of love or interpersonal relationship or good feelings or whatever the heck. Those things can happen, but they're secondary. They're dependent on
like procreation is secondary. You don't have to have babies to be able to have a valid
procreation is not okay.
Marriage.
Why do no one procreation is secondary is the first person to say that publicly is Margaret Sanger.
Well, I'm just saying I don't know how you say it's primary when it's clear when it's what I'm going to say when it's the purpose of marriage when you can have a marriage even if procreation doesn't happen. That's all I'm saying. The way that you're using it, I don't think follows.
You can't have a marriage if procreation doesn't happen.
You can't have a marriage if procreation doesn't happen is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so because there's no duty, you don't have to because God's in charge of the fertility.
I agree.
Okay, so there is a purpose to the conjugal act, and it's right there in the contract. Should I pull you up in writing so you can see it?
Sure. Show me where it's
okay, hang on. Watch this. There are other people who have this information, but not a lot of people who want to talk about it like me. People get shy, whatever. 1917. Okay, so here it is. Can you make it bigger?
Well, I think you have to make it. Can you zoom in at all? I'm gonna make it full screen here.
Present. Okay, here,
you have to. Can you like zoom in on your screen that this is on the original?
Present slide video.
Like slideshow.
No, I guess not. But it's okay. I'll read. I'm surprised you can't see it bigger, but it's pretty big on my end. Here, share this tab instead. There we go. Sorry. Okay, ready?
Okay. That's better. Yep.
Okay. Here's the canon. This is marriage right here, and it can't. Nothing can change this. Even if you reword canon law, you cannot change it. Okay, because it's nature. Matrimonial consent is the act of the will by which each party gives and accepts a perpetual, that's till death, and exclusive, that means no adultery. Right over the body for what? Right over the body for love, for total self-gift, for Christopher West videos? No. For acts which are of themselves for suitable for the generation of children. Okay? So NFP is not an act suitable for the generation of children because you are designing it suitable for non-generation, right? In Humanae Vitae, you don't want a baby because if NFP acts are suitable for children, then so is contraception because you can still have a baby. You can see what I'm saying?
But so is abstinence. Abstinence is not acts for which are suitable for the generation.
That's right. So the marital consent gives you have a right. Doesn't mean you have to exercise the right. But if you do exercise the right, it's for generation of children. That's it. Now, if you look at the new code in 83.
Hold on. Let me ask you this question here. So when you say perpetual and exclusive right over the body, like whose body are you talking? Like what body or whose body?
It's right there, and that's where I say marital debt comes from the Bible, 1 Corinthians 7:4. Okay. You have each spouse has a right over the other's body.
Other's body, right?
Yeah. So that is the legal object of consent because that's where babies come from, the body. Biology, okay? Your theology of the body stuff doesn't even enter into it. It's not here nor there. It's just producing babies. But now in the new code in 83, they had to accommodate NFP, which has a new natural purpose of marriage, which is not procreation. It's something else. They call it love, but basically back in Tobias's day, it was fleshly lust. So it's a euphemism. Matrimonial consent is an act of the will by which man and a woman, through an irrevocable covenant, mutually give and accept each other. So you used to have a right over the body, and now you have a right over the self, each other. So the right over the body, it's like the difference between the right to the brain and the right to the mind. You can't put the mind in a legal definition, but you can get a brain transplant, but you can't get a mind transplant. Give and accept each other in order to establish marriage. So this canon basically says marriage is marriage. That's all it says.
But didn't you say before that canon law is infallible, though?
No, it's not infallible. And even the new code says marriage is ordered toward procreation and good of the spouses. It's just wrong. It's not ordered. So canon law is not infallible.
That would include the old version, right? Is not infallible.
Yeah. But okay. The church does define marriage, and if the church can't define marriage, then let me just think about this for a second. Canon law is not infallible, but when it's talking about nature and stuff, faith and morals, it is. Now and this has been the definition of marriage, always has from the start.
What was the addition of that prior? When did that prior one come out? Do you know? The old version of the
1917.
Okay.
So
what existed before? So did anything exist before that?
Yes, canon law was basically, your rules and regs for the church that were promulgated and piled up over about 1,000 years. Okay, a giant pile of canon laws, and then I can't remember which saint got together and they said, "Hey, Pope says commissioned you. You're going to make the new code." So we've got to get this more in we've got to get organized even more. That's where it came from. So this is when you talk about marriage, mutually give and accept each other. Now we have a new purpose, which is a total self-gift, which you've heard before, which totally turns on Christopher West. He gets all excited. And he tries to. So this is why, okay, Eucharistic love. We go to communion. It's a total self-gift. It's a mutual total self-gift. I receive communion and totally giving to God, and God totally gives to me, and it's all Trinitarian. So then you're trying to do that with your spouse, and you just miss the whole mark because you're not trying to have a baby anymore. You're trying to create this romance cover situation, man. And you can't fix God's marriage. You can't do it. All you do is wreck it. And that's what do we have now? Look at the marriage stats. They're like they're in the tank. Bad. Guys are like, you know what MGTOW is, right? You've never heard of that. Hello.
No.
Men going their own way is big. And then there's the 4B movement. Have you heard of that with the chicks? Okay,
No.
they're like, it's I think it's Korean or something, but basically it's like we're not having kids because we're not being slaves, we're not being your baby factory. So the women are like, we're not doing marriage, and the guys are like, forget this, because if this is based on emotion, if then no. But it's a contract for the right to make babies. This is why it's objective sin to try to not make babies, but try to do the conjugal act.
I mean, I think right and duty are different things, though. So, like, I think
Right and duty are different things. That's correct. So there is no, like I said, there's no duty to produce babies. But if you're going to do the conjugal act, you can't do it for something other than. Oh, my dog is dying to get in here. All right, Susan, come in. She's like, Dad, you're talking way too long. You can't even get in here, kid, because I got my green screen up. Whatever, girlfriend. Here, I'll move this garbage can. You want to come over? Come on. She's a big golden retriever, and she's a major love sponge. Come on over here, Susie. Come on. Come here. Come here. Come here.
What's the name?
Susie Q. She's not camera shy, but she's gonna hit the sleeping bag down here.
Okay.
She's tired of being alone. She sit down and just, hey, Susie, chill. Sit down. Relax. She's like, Dad, I want you to pet me. No, you have to sit, hold still. All right. So, I'm still not selling you, right? I'm a pretty good salesman, but something's wrong here.
I just, it seems to me that I mean, I understand the concept of the marital debt and the right to the body. Okay, I'll give you that. But I think that's different than duty, and I think if a couple is using NFP, let's just talk about a couple that's doing it consensually. So there's no problem with exercising the right because they're both agreeing not to engage in the conjugal act when they're fertile and whatever. So I think that is a different issue than excuse me, having the right to your spouse's body. Does that make sense?
No. You have a right to everyone has a right to their spouse's body to make babies, but they don't have a right to that spouse's body to make other things. So like primarily Christopher West type motives. Okay? And so this is what John Paul II, he's a total revolutionary. He's like, it's not, and Dietrich von Hildebrand was just as bad, or I call him the father of gay marriage, because he starts saying it's all about love. That's where love wins comes from. Love legally wins. That's what love wins mean.
Okay, so I know you say that a lot, John, and how would I put this delicately? I understand. I can't imagine what you've gone through, okay? I know what you've gone through. But what you've gone through is different than most of us. I have a good marriage. I love my wife. We're happily together. It's not like she's depriving me because whatever, right? We're on the same page, and I think most couples that are struggling with this are on the same page. So it's not a matter of one spouse depriving the other. They're trying to figure out what they can consensually do together.
Okay, so this is what does reality say they can consensually do together? Then we have to go back to the definition of marriage. The new definition, the working definition, what the bishops say, this is Vatican II speak, all right? So Vatican II, it was a big sales meeting, and at the end of it they said, I never said Simon says. This is not binding. Wink, wink, okay? But it sure looked binding, but it wasn't. So everyone ran with it, because when you start giving people Catholic contraception, dude, they're not going to put it down. So we are going, and then all the feminists dig it. All the chicks are like, no.
But I think the stats disprove your point, because almost no one uses NFP. No one uses NFP in the Catholic way. There are plenty of non-Catholics that will use NFP and then they'll use a condom or the pull out during the fertile time. But there are not very many Catholics that use NFP the way that the church says, and then you got to be, completely abstinent the rest of the time. It's not just Catholic contraception, because otherwise everyone would using it. Almost no one uses it.
No, it's whether anyone uses it or not. That's what it is. That's the slang version, because you're using it to not generate children, and the marriage right is for the generation of children. That's the only right you have.
Yeah,
If
no,
you're
good
not trying to generate children, you don't have the right. God is in charge of the fertility. You're in charge of the purpose of what what your purpose is. So contraception says purpose is not to have children. NFP says our purpose is not to have children. That's an unnatural purpose, and it's an illegal purpose. But the new code sweeps all that under the rug and just uses a bunch of fluffy language, and everyone's like, oh, cool. So we can work on our, and then the chicks are all into it. But then when the rubber meets the road, you've now created a new version of marriage, which isn't in nature or in law, and you have trouble. It's like I'm gonna do drugs and be happy. It doesn't work, but people do it anyway because they think it's going to help them, and they get stuck in it. I'm going to do NFP and be happy. There's all sorts of unsung war stories about that, and at least you kind of come out and say it. You sort of pour cold water on all this happy clappy Christopher West stuff because it's not real, but they put mega spin on it. Just like people who do divorce, they put major spin on. Oh, I'm way happier now, and divorce was the greatest thing in my life. They're gaslighting themselves, and they're doing cognitive dissonance. They're going to hell for it. You can't take what God says and say, oh, it's working for me. It's not going to work when you take your last breath. Your conscience is going to get you, and so you have to.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is why we're such weird bedfellows, because I don't like NFP.
I don't think anyone really likes it, except the chicks will sort of put a spin on it.
My wife likes NFP more than I do, for sure.
If NFP caused babies, she wouldn't like it. It's like it doesn't. By the way, kids are often, you've seen that if you use contraception, the kids find out like, you didn't want us. You know, we weren't your top priority. So it's not good. You want. This is why I'm saying, just jettison this secular attitude about no kids. You want kids. The kids intuitively know if you want them. And this is nature and law, Catholicism 101. After 1950, stuff went off the rails.
See, this is where I think you have this wrong. I think the couple that uses contraception, when they have kids, those kids are objectively wanted. I mean, they only got pregnant because they really wanted to have kids. For the rest of us, it just happens, or whatever, right? I mean, so I don't think that argument actually holds water. I think that actually is an argument in favor of contraception if you wanted to do so.
Humanae Vitae 16 says the purpose of contraception and NFP are identical. It does it. Humanae Vitae, it says it cannot be denied that the purpose, the reason these couples use contraception or NFP is to not have a baby, and that they wish none would occur. That is exactly what it says in Humanae Vitae 16 right now. So,
right, and but they distinguish and say that the method used is different and distinguishable. Right?
Yeah, so I use that analogy. If you don't want to go to school, you can shoot the bus driver, or you can only show up for the bus at 3 a.m. and say, I'm not doing anything wrong. There's no bus here, okay? I'm just not going. The goal is no school. There's 100 ways to not get to school. You can do it organically, or you can do it with an AK-47, but you're going to miss school one way or the other. So, but if the purpose is education, you can't do, it doesn't matter what nature you use to avoid school. If the purpose is procreation, it doesn't matter what method you use to avoid the purpose. This is why everyone who's not Catholic doesn't have this institutional bias. They're like, that's Catholic contraception, and annulment is Catholic divorce. In practice, it's all it is.
The only people that call NFP Catholic contraception are people who've never tried to use it.
No. Whether they've used it or not doesn't really matter. It's just if they've tried to use it, they'll call it Catholic they won't call it that because they're trying to justify. The reason they use it is because they're like, I don't want to go to hell for contraception, so I'll do this.
They'll use it to justify using contraception because they'll say they're the same thing, but there's a reason why they're using contraception and not NFP, because NFP sucks and contraception is easy.
And if relations without babies is God's will, then what difference does it make what method you use to achieve it?
Well, I think you're right. I mean,
It doesn't. That's why I'm saying
well, I think it underscores.
What's wrong with contraception? What is wrong
Well,
with it?
I think the arguments against contraception start to break down for that very reason.
That's why
Not that the argument for
this is why all Catholics just do that, and this is why they cannot talk about why contraception is wrong, because it doesn't make any sense. They're saying it separates the unitive and the procreative significance, meaning, feeling, poetry. None of that's legal stuff. It's before we got into all this Christopher West grooviness, the purpose was the generation of children. That's the only thing you have to have.
Because they didn't have a way to not have children, child.
Yeah, that
it
NFP.
Wasn't like in the 1800s the pharmacy was stocked with contraception and good Catholics said, "Oh, no, we're not going to use it." It didn't exist, so you can't just can't engage in this historical revisionism. There's a reason why contraception came up in the Anglican Church in the 1930s, because they finally had a way to do it. NFP really didn't exist until the 1950s or 60s.
There's I wish I could find the quote. There's some pope, like one of the first popes. He basically said, if you're trying to not have kids, you can't do that. I wish I had the quote handy. I could try to find it. But
Peter said that.
The Pope Saint so and so from like 127 A.D. I can't remember which.
Okay.
Everyone used to say this stuff.
Okay, but here we have to be fair about this. If you look at Saint Augustine, at the time of Augustine, they thought that sex at all was bad, sexual pleasure was probably a sin, and they merely tolerated it if you could make a baby. That's kind of how this came out. It came out of a contempt and annoyance at sex. Augustine said it would be great if we could just
so what is the origin of that? What is the origin of what you say is contempt and annoyance? Where does that come from?
Reading Augustine.
Okay. It's not contempt and annoyance. It is that, like St. Thomas Aquinas says, it's the same thing as fornication, and it's evil because it's original sin you're creating. So it has to be justified by procreation. If you're not trying to get pregnant, you are committing sin, because this act is intrinsically evil unless you can justify it with an honest purpose.
Well, they just thought the body was bad and pleasure was
bad.
No,
the body's not bad.
They thought it was. They thought it was, though.
They thought it was.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and read Augustine, those guys were pretty messed up. I mean,
okay, you say that stuff because you're trying to come up with a reason why NFP is not wrong. That's what they weren't messed up. It was the Manichees that were messed up, and that's what Saint Augustine criticized, because they thought the body was bad. He used to be one of them. He's like, y'all are no, and they were kind of doing primitive NFP back then. Right. He's like, no. You can't try to not have kids, and that act. Like I said, it has to be justified with procreation.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think that's more or less right. Sex is bad unless you can tolerate it for making babies. That was more or less what Augustine thought. That's where theology of the body came out of, because people look at that and that looks pretty abhorrent.
So there was massive pressure, in the 20th century. You had Margaret Sanger doing her thing. You had all these Catholics going, can't we do that too? And what's the Pope going to say? No, get back to being a baby factory, and your husband is in charge. That doesn't sell. And so they had massive political pressure.
I would say for good reason, but whatever.
No. When you have the faith, this is God's plan, and she is saved through childbearing, and he's saved through work, man. That's in the Bible, and this is where all this stuff.
Where is it at in the Bible? I know I've heard it, but where is it at?
That's because after the fall, right after the fall, Eve is in trouble, so she is saved through childbearing, and then Adam is in trouble, so he is saved through the sweat of his brow. He's got to work.
I work, and my wife has had 9 kids, so I don't know.
Yeah, whether your wife had 1 kid or 19 kids isn't relevant to whether NFP is okay, because there's no duty to procreate, but there is a you have to keep the natural purpose intact if you're going to use the conjugal act. And it's also per law. But again, in the 20th century, there was a lot of pressure for popes to do something with this. So Pius XII said it's a grave sin. All the popes have said no reason, however grave, you can do this. And then he says, okay, for a grave reason, because it kind of sounded good. And then it's a fish out of water.
Contraception, though. He said you can't use contraception.
No, he said you.
That's what Castile Cannubi was about. That's what the Lambeth.
Pius XI. So I'm talking about Pius XII in 51. He said the same, but Pius XII was the first one to say baby production is a duty, which is Protestant.
Yeah,
okay?
I agree. I don't think that makes sense.
And then he said it's a sin against nature to use NFP unless you have a grave reason, which makes no sense. Because nothing can justify sinning against nature. So he said this stuff. This is like obviously before the internet, and everyone's kind of like, "Wow, the Pope said a little rhythm method," and it's just off to the races, man. And then now you have an angry mob of or just everyone's like, "We're doing this. You can't stop it." So what does Vatican II comes in and says? Hey, it's all cool. It's all about love. All you need is love. That's the main thing now. Therefore, NFP is okay because you're just working on your love. Procreation is secondary.
I would be more receptive to your argument if more than just a very small fraction of people actually used NFP. Like if it's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
It's the only thing.
Everyone went and used contraception. They didn't use NFP because NFP sucks.
It's not the greatest thing since sliced bread.
But that's what
there's a huge there's a perennial desire, especially for women, to be able to get married and not have kids when they don't want to have kids. Huge. Okay. So they're always looking for ways to not have kids. Always. And now if NFP says we don't have to do that, then they're all about it. And then everyone kind of says, well, if we don't have to, we can just do contraception and follow our conscience. And that's kind of what most people know. And the priest never says anything and everyone can go to communion. If the priest said anyone who's contracepting, never go to communion until you fix that.
See, this is where I don't understand your fixation on NFP, because I get it. I mean, everyone's using contraception. Less than 4% of Catholics use NFP. And those of us that use it hate it. And we're afraid we're going to go to hell because of it, because of the alternative, right? But I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand why you have such vitriol for NFP when hardly anyone uses it.
Okay, whether anyone uses it or not, what it does is it creates try to answer your question. It messes up marriages, for one. Also, though, it necessarily requires a redefinition of nature and a redefinition of law. So your marriage, because my wife said I can just get a divorce and an annulment, no problem, right? With NFP, that's what facilitates all that. Divorce is not a sin with NFP, and annulment is on demand with NFP. Do you know why I say that? Do you know why I say that? You don't
because
know.
of your experience. I mean, I
no, that's not why. Yeah. Whether or not I've experienced about it, it has nothing to do with it. I say that because the definition of what you consent to is no longer objective and finite. It is subjective and infinite, namely love. That's your new purpose for the conjugal act. So if marriage is love-based, your contract is to gift of self, then that can't be defined. You can't say what the duty of the gift of self is, because the right over the body for acts. Well, how about the right over the self for acts? Where's your other self? You're not giving me your total self. Oh yeah, I am. No, you're not. Who's to judge that? So what NFP does is it overturns it ruins the edifice of marriage. It's kind of like saying, let's have no southern border. Let's just have a love border. Isn't that God is love? Let's have a love border. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, flowers for everyone.
Okay, hold on. You've really gone off of the weeds here. I'm going to try and bring us back. I mean,
I thought it was a great point.
I don't see how you got from NFP to the southern border.
Well, because
maybe I'm just tired.
objective law. If the border is how you feel, dude, and it's not defined with a longitude and latitude, then the border is wherever you think it is, and we're all citizens of the world, bro. But if marriage is if you can define marriage legally and with a finite group of rights, now you have something to structure. But if marriage has no finite amount of rights, it's unlimited rights, which is what we have now. You have no rights whatsoever. I can show it to you right.
Yeah,
What?
I mean, what do you do about the stats that say that people that use NFP have very, very low divorce rates? Doesn't mean it's zero, but compared to the rest of the population, people
Okay,
that
yeah,
use NFP have very,
that's
very low.
that's one of those misleading statistics. Fine, very few people who use NFP get divorced. Okay, that's because they're kind of religious and stuff. That's the reason they're using it. So they're going to kind of have less divorce, fewer divorce. But I would say that those couples that are religious that use zero family planning at all are basically have a 0% divorce rate. So NFP causes some divorce, you could say, because your new contract, your institution is love, which is nothing. There's no foundation there. Like let's assume you're correct. Why do you think people that use no NFP or anything at all, why do those marriages stay together? Why? Like I said, because they are.
Because they're stuck with each other and they can't get out?
No, they can get out because marriage is love. Divorce is not a sin. If NFP is listed, divorce is not a sin because there's no contract, because there's no rights. So divorce offends nothing. But they are religious and they kind of know divorce. All I know is like divorce is bad, so we're not going to do that, And so and you can, I guess, relieve a little pressure on the kids and the number of kids and stuff like that. So that can sort of help, you might say, in one sense. But no, it's like one of those causation things. So the divorce rate among Catholic couples that use no family planning is about 0. That's my theory. Do you think it's wrong?
No, but I think it's probably for the same reason that NFP couples tend not to. They're religious. I mean, my wife couldn't afford to divorce me if she wanted to at this point.
When women want to do stuff, they do it. That's
Well,
why there's no expression hell hath no fury like a man scorned. When women feel it, dude, but if they are told divorce is objectively sinful, you can't ever do it, which you cannot. You can separate, but you can't divorce.
So why would you humor me then? If you're married to a woman who hates your guts and wants out, how the hell do you want to stay with that?
You may not want to, but what's God's will?
Horrible situation.
Okay, lots of saints have it's God's will. I don't know where the funny part is. It's called white martyrdom. It's like, did you think Jesus wanted to be on the cross? But he knew this is God's will. Okay, so this is the purpose. All right, so you can sanctify your spouse, and that's called for better, for worse. For better, for worse has no application anymore if you can get out of the marriage.
I'm just saying. I think one of the hardest things about marriage is not being able to go anywhere when my wife is really pissed off at me. So
you can go somewhere because you need to. If she's really mad, she's not giving her total self. Therefore, she's not capable. Therefore, your marriage is invalid. And the new definition per the New American Bible is, you can bail if things aren't working out.
I get you. I get that you're jaded, John, but most
people
don't have that experience. My wife and I have a good, solid marriage. Our battle is together. The NFP is the battle together. We're not pitted against each other at all. And I think that
makes no difference if I'm jaded or not. It's what the facts are. Now, the only people who care about autism are the people whose kids have autism. All right. So when the people who care about communism are the ones who were able to survive it and escape from Hungary. You know what I mean? So whereas we're all like, all the college kids are like, yeah, communism's great. Actually, if you lived it, you would find it's different. So
But again, you're imputing something to my marriage and most marriages that I don't think actually exist. I think because of what you've gone through. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, well, the law is if you filed for divorce tomorrow, could you go to communion?
I don't know. I'm not sure I know the
Sure,
answer
you
to
could. Who's going to deny you communion? They'll say divorce. We don't recognize divorce. Divorce is a civil matter. That's wrong, but that's what they tell you. And the reason they tell you that is because NFP says there's no more marriage contract. It's a covenant, and there's no more rights.
So why isn't my wife left me then? Because if she's free to do so, what's keeping her bound to me?
For a variety of reasons, like you said.
Besides my great good looks and everything.
Yeah, of course, and that you do so many cool podcasts and stuff. So she's probably hanging on for that. So
wait for the money to start rolling.
Oh yeah. She wants you to spend more time doing it. So, people have reasons why it obviously is be stupid and stuff. But when push comes to shove, if you put your hand on a hot stove, you're going to take it off. But if you know it's a mortal sin, you're not going to take it off. You're going to ask for grace to let your hand fry. Just like, who is the first martyr? The guy who said, "You can turn me over now. I'm done on this side." That guy?
Barnabas? No.
No. It's a river in Canada or whatever. That guy. Yeah, St. Lawrence.
All right.
He fried, but he did it because he knew this is truth. So, it says in Casti Connubii too, no matter how hard things get, there's always grace available. But when you don't have to hold your hand on that burner, you have the choice to take it off. If that burner is hurting too bad, you can take it off. If your marriage is hurting too bad, somebody's not capable of a total gift of self. And you're an abuser because I'm feeling so bad, you must not be capable of a total gift of self. Therefore, separation is fine because there's no more contract to rights over the body. There's a right to the self, which can't be defined in legal terms. So marriage is no longer a legal institution. It's a boyfriend-girlfriend play house and see how it goes arrangement. Well, Christopher West is here to add grease to the skids, but that's all he can do. And to answer your question. That's why I'm kind of anti-NFP, is it because it destroys marriage, and it's also the family is, you're not going to have enough kids, and the marriage rates and the whole thing. So people are afraid to get married now. There's a lot of that.
I'm afraid for my kids to get married because I'll be honest with you, John. If you're right about everything, I would tell every one of my kids, do not get married because it is not worth it.
Okay, so I'm going to do another marriage video called Gay Pre-Cana, because it's all this mutual submission stuff. But what I've said in some of my other videos is don't be afraid to get married. You should get married, but you've got to take the contract into your own hands today, because the bishop is AWOL on it and the state doesn't care about anything. So what I'm saying is everyone has to know what the purpose is and what the consequences for violating the purpose.
None of us knows what we're getting into. Like no one prepares you for marriage, and no one prepares you for the sort of endless pitfalls of mortal sins that are around every corner. Marriage isn't worth it if you're right. If you're right, and I'm not saying you're wrong, if you're right, I think we are doing a disservice to people actually telling them they should get married, because you are far better running to the desert and praying for an early death.
This is what Pearl Davis says, and she's right about that. She's like, forget marriage. This is a bad deal. And you got all these people from Daily Wire and stuff, and everyone's saying, oh no, do marriage. Marriage is a good deal, even though it's a risk. What they're wrong about is there's no more contract. There's nothing to sign. It's like home ownership or getting a mortgage with no terms. Anyone can bail, and so why am I gonna be a bank to lend money when everyone can just bail on my mortgage? It's not going to happen.
Terrible. I mean, a contract, like,
what do you mean?
What sounds your life with someone that you have a contract with?
No one may. Okay, marriage
Mrs.
is the
Onan, you have a contractual relationship with me to make babies. Like, how is that attractive to anyone? Why wouldn't people want love?
They may want that, but that's not that. Just like you can enjoy your plane ride to Chicago or not, but it is a plane ride to Chicago, and you're not getting out till we get there. So you might as well make the best of it. And then if you have an
Or don't
escape
get on
route,
the plane. Just don't get on the plane. Go live in the desert.
okay, so if you never fly in a plane, you're gonna that's a drawback too. But most people are
At least you're not in hell. Yeah.
the natural state is marriage. It's a natural calling. It's not a supernatural calling. It's natural, and so most people do that. But it comes with consequences for the kids because they have a natural law right to an intact home. And that means you have to have it binding. You have a wed lock, and that lock has to be placed on hard metal without feelings, like a border, okay? If you don't have a border defined, there's nothing the lock is on. The lock is how I feel in my heart, and if I'm not feeling it anymore, I want out. I used to want in, but now I want out. Peace in, peace out.
Yeah, marriage is a prison. Then you're locked.
Okay, okay. Life is a prison, and there's no getting out of it. So you might as well go to heaven. But what some people do is they commit suicide to get out of the prison.
Not to get married. I mean, why put yourself in that cage if you actually care about your soul?
Because you thrive in that cage through grace, and you do better. But you have to realize and identify what it is you're actually committing to in marriage, which is a rights contract. Now, you can make the best of it or the worst of it, or don't get involved at all if you don't want that. But if you do want that, don't redefine it. NFP has redefined the cage to open borders. And this is why there's no more stigma to divorce. This is why everyone who divorces gets communion, because it's no longer a sin to divorce after NFP. That's the logical thing. This is why gay marriage exists, because if it's not about procreation, you can marry some dude, or you can marry your pickup truck, whatever. And you don't have, for this reason, God created them male and female. Well, therefore, if that's not the reason anymore, then you can. That's why gay marriage has kind of become a thing, because love wins. That's why they all say love wins. And love wins the legal battle, and NFP is what caused love wins.
Do you love your kids, John?
Of course.
Do you love your wife?
Yes.
Do you think she loves you?
No. Because because the Bible says when you hate your spouse, you put them away.
Do you think she ever did? Do you think she once loved you?
Well, that one would argue, yes, because she said that, and she gets married. So people, but love is a choice, and it just like hope is the virtue when there's no hope. Okay, so did Jesus love his Father while he was on the cross? Did he love it? See what I mean? It's like he's no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends. So there's all kinds of love has a bunch of different definitions, but it's agape is the highest kind of love. So you sacrifice for your spouse.
Should I go over and put my hand on a hot stove because that's causing suffering? There's merit in suffering. Do you think I should do that?
If you're a saint and you're called to flog yourself or wear a hair shirt, and your spiritual director says go for it, then yeah. If your spiritual director says put your hand on a hot plate, I don't think he would, but if he did, but most of them, so that's why saints do that stuff, man. They
doesn't that sound just a little crazy? I mean, doesn't that sound a little crazy to do that? To
put your hand on a hot plate? Hot stove? Yeah, that sounds crazy, but there are saints who they have, I think it was St. Francis of Assisi, he was when you get into sainthood territory, the devil comes out, okay? So he was having lots of bad thoughts, so I think he had no clothes on, he jumped in the pricker bushes, and that kind of cured him. You ever heard that story? Yeah. So
have you heard the story that St. Alphonsus Liguori had his hands tied behind his back so he wouldn't jerk off?
That's a new one on me. But anyway, and
whether that's St. Alphonsus Liguori couldn't control himself enough that he has to have his hands tied behind his back.
Okay, so and I guess until he was able to get enough grace to control himself. I mean, yeah, so whatever it takes, man. If you can't handle alcohol, just don't go to the bar, right? So if you can't handle online porn, you have to throw your computer in the garbage. Doesn't that sound a little crazy? Well, not necessarily, depending. But most people can kind of handle it, You get stuff pop up in your computer all the time. Swipe away, move away, move away. It's everywhere. You look at anything, it's like, Like, it's like, whoa, get
Th-
this out.
Yeah, this is why I am starting to think Catholic marriage under your standard or Humani Vitae is nearly impossible for most people. They're going to fall into sin because it's so difficult under
Okay,
your
so
scenario or under your standard or my
Trent,
standard, whatever.
Trent, and Casticanubi say that it's a heresy. There's always grace available for your state in life, no matter how hard it is. There is grace available. That's the point. So God created the institution. If you want to do that, do that. But you just, if you stay, so there's no atheists in a foxhole, but there could be atheists back on base when there's lots of beer available. Okay, so when push comes to shove and you get desperate, where do you turn? To God, because you got nowhere else. So when marriage is for better for worse and things get worse, you have to turn to God unless there's an out for you, and NFP gives you an out. I either don't have to have kids or I can separate and divorce, no problem, and get an annulment because there's no more legal contract. It's not a contract. It's a covenant of, it's a love covenant, bro. And who's to say I'm violating it? You just don't have the gift of self. In fact, I think you're abusing me right now. So I find you're abusive. That's how I feel, and you're not capable of doing a podcast. You're an abuser, and that's how I feel. And who's to judge? I'll get the podcast annulment. You're an abusive host. It's like that's all it is. It's annulment on demand.
Well, I think that the for better for worse. Here's the trouble I have in the sort of the Catholics perspective of marriage is the
Can you please hold that thought and push pause? Okay.
yep.
All right.
I'll mute you. I did not expect us still to be going. Good to see you guys in the chat. Jonah finally go to bed. Yeah, I don't think that in the same way that John and I have some agreement on some things, I don't think it says much that Pearl agrees with some of these things.
Kind of like green screens. I kind of like green screens, even though they're not cool anymore. The kids don't do it or whatever. Everyone's like, nah. But it's sort of fun because I can always put a new theme back there. Now,
Yeah.
you were on a roll. You were saying something about how marriage is impossible or something like that.
Yeah, so I think the better for work, like for me, being a dad of nine is a really hard job. Um, I I mean I work really hard. I have a lot of stress. I'm up a lot at night helping take care of the kids and stuff. All that stuff is difficult. I give up a lot of stuff
Uh
to
huh.
do this, right?
Yep, I can relate.
And,
Sure.
and that's all hardship, but I don't really find that bothersome. I mean, I think that's what I signed up for. But the problem is, as I see it, is all these ways that couples or individuals can fall into mortal sin under the great weight of marriage.
Okay.
That's really what
So
compels.
marriage seems super hard, almost impossible if you play by the rules.
Yeah, from a moral standpoint, like I think all the sins that are kind of lingering around are happen. You know, are the people that are dealing with that are, you know, if you've got a big family, life is hard. Like you are just trying to do your best some days, and then it just seems like everywhere you turn, there's a mortal sin. There's a mortal sin. That's where I really struggle to understand the why it is that way if that's the way it's supposed to be, and that is why I would just discourage people from getting married, not because of the long nights and the long days of work, but because if our souls truly matter and our kids' souls truly matter, marriage seems like just a breeding ground for mortal sin as opposed to just
So
being
yes,
single.
the breeding ground for mortal sin is amplified quite a bit by not getting married. Think about what would you be looking like if you weren't? You'd probably have a mullet and an earring and who knows what all. And I'd be a punk rock animal. I'd be like stupid. So marriage does clean up your act. It civilizes men and stuff, but and it also women need the same. They need to have kids, and they'll become feminists if they don't submit to their husband. So it's a win-win thing there. And also the missing ingredient, like I said, you have to think dynamically, not just we're going to control our environment to make the best of it. No, you jump off the cliff and let God fill in the grace. Otherwise, you can't hang. So, like in my case, just imagine if your wife got a boyfriend and kicked you out of the house and made you pay for everything. And your kids, you got to talk to your kids on Skype.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that, dude. That's insane. That's like suicide material right there. And that's why the middle-aged white guy's highest suicide rate. So you either do that or you pray and get grace to rise to the occasion. Those are your two choices. I think there was a story recently. Some lady said, I'm going to get the divorce, and they had the kid and stuff. And then the husband came in, and I think he shot her and shot himself. The guys are like, I got to do something. This major injustice, because marriage is based on justice. It's not just feelings. But my point, I think I said earlier, is it's a heresy to say there's not enough grace available no matter how hard things get. Like look at Maximilian Kolbe, getting a raw deal there in the old concentration camp, but he had grace to do it. And same with St. Lawrence, grace. So, and no matter how hard the marriage gets, if you are open to grace, you're going to get it. And if you get what you pray for, but it's kind of hard to pray for grace if you're hooked on porn and you're doing the porn, you know what I mean? Or you're doing some other sin. It's hard to ask for grace. You're kind of like, God's a nice guy, but I'm going to take care of this. So that's why I feel any type of contraception or NFP is sort of the same thing. You're managing God's plan for him because you know how to plan better. And God's don't do that. Liturgical abuse is death, okay, in the Old Testament, and onanism is death. This is why Trent said, if you take steps to not have a baby, it's akin to murder. And that's why contraception has always been known as murder, even if you're not killing a baby, because you are.
Well, they used to think it was murder, though. I mean,
no, it's a form of murder. Even if you're not killing the baby, you're killing the baby that's supposed to come there. This is because God knew you from before you were born. He wants a certain amount of babies per a certain amount of acts, which he controls, which he's destined for all eternity. And now we're showing up because we're super smart now. Now in 2025, like we know what's going on. And so we let God know. We got the new thing. Christopher West is groovy with it.
So
and
a couple that uses total abstinence could commit mortal sins and go to hell too then.
Anyone can. Doesn't matter abstinence or not or whatever. Sure. But it's an objective fact. If you take the biological and the legal purpose of marriage and change it, that's grave sin. But this is why you don't say it's mortal sin, you say it's grave sin, because God can judge the mortal part, but objectively. Okay. So right now, a lot of people think NFP is okay because of kind of everything they've heard and said. So it's hard to be judged on that. Okay. But you can make the case. And a lot of people are kind of catching on to that. Like you need the bishop's permission to divorce. Nobody knew that 10 years. I mean, now it's kind of getting to be complex. I've been making a bunch of noise about it, and other people have too. So people have, because years ago, you've never heard that you have to have the bishop's permission to file for divorce. You ever heard that before?
No.
But you have now, right? You've heard of it in recent history, right?
Thanks to you, John.
Okay. And it's all historical, and it's all based on that contract. That's why the Protestants call it a covenant, because they have no church to govern the spouses with a separation court like you used to have in your diocese back in the late 60s, a separation court. It's gone because we have a covenant now, just like the Protestants. There's no terms, legal terms. It's just a love covenant, bro. And so You make the best of it, and then what you do is you end up committing sin trying to make the best of it. That's like that. There's
Well,
that
that's what
song.
marriage is. I mean, I'm just telling you, like the times that I needed to go to confession as a single guy are nothing compared to what it's like as a married guy. And it's not for a lack of effort. And I like being a dad. I think I'm a pretty good dad. I'm very happy to be a dad. But if the solely is if we're solely looking at your soul and how many sins you commit, it makes no sense for me to be married, because it's much easier to be a celibate than it is to be a
Okay, so it gets
semi-active
again
married.
when you become a celibate, though, you're setting yourself up for even more sins.
What
It's
kind
not
of
easier,
sins?
huh?
What kind of
What kind of
sins?
sins?
Yeah.
Wasting time, getting into dumb activities, and it's just a trajectory thing. The devil has moving in it long term. So you become a celibate, and then you start to do you get hardening of the attitudes. You don't have your rough edges rubbed off because there's no. So this is why old bachelors are weird. They all got their ways and stuff, and they can they
But
can't be.
none of those have sort of these nice defined edges like all of the sexual sins, right? I mean, we're just paranoid about the sexual sins because you know it when it happens, as opposed to these other things tend to be more a matter of
Yes, but if you go to
degree and
frequent confession, you can root them out. And if you do a decent examination of conscience, did I say the tongue is really bad? What you can do with you can sin. So you got to you have to follow your conscience, and if you go to frequent confession, you'll get grace for it. So I'm like totally pro marriage. I think that Michael Knowles and Pearl Davis both have points, but Michael Knowles is denying the marriage contract being gone, and Pearl Davis is denying, I guess, the grace available, or she's just pointing out that it's stupid to sign up for a contract where you have all obligations and no rights. It's dumb because then anyone can just bail out of it, and that's all marriage is. Because it's not, you've heard it a ton of times. It's not a contract. It's more than a. They all say that, and no Catholic ever said that before 1965. None. Marriage is the contract itself. It's right there in Arcanum 23, Leo the 13th, and that contract has defined rights. And if you look at the new the commentary of canon law, which is like the Bible for canonists, came out in 2000, and they'll say in there, Vatican II kind of opened our eyes to the real nature of marriage, which is a love thing. Therefore, we started expanding the rights, and now it's impossible to list them all. It says it right there in black and white in the commentary, and that's what your bishop thinks. So when you go to the separation court, they're like, "Where's my right to the conjugal life?" They're like, "Well, your wife has a right to yourself, and you're not giving yourself because you're insisting on your conjugal rights. So you need to die to self and give her your whole self. Get out of here." Okay, there's no more rights, and that's exactly what happened in France. The guy's like, she's denying the conjugal rights. They're like, no, there ain't no rights. It's you have a right to personal autonomy, the right to privacy, just like abortion.
well,
Go ahead, sorry.
well. So why do you uphold the marital debt? Why isn't the response to be like, well, if your spouse doesn't want to engage with you, you just accept it as suffering the same way that Lawrence accepted martyrdom? Like, why do you? I mean, it seems like the manly, sacrificial thing to do in that situation is to be celibate, not invoke your right to have.
What is the
conjugal act.
womanly sacrificial thing to do in that case? To honor the debt. It's like you in other words, sacrifice works both ways, but you do have that right. And just like she has a right to stay home and you need to work, if you start saying, I'm just not going to work, did something happen to the computer? Okay, so that once everybody knows the story, then they don't. It's like, what if you want a girlfriend? Your wife could say, I don't, she has a right to you being exclusive with her. She has that right. But if you say, I don't want that, so you need to die to self and let me do my thing, it's like, do you really want me hanging around? I don't want to be with you. I want the girlfriend. Is that what you really want? No, we have to go back to the contract and make the best of that and ask for grace to do it. Otherwise, you lose, your kids lose, everybody loses, but they're pursuing what they want. So the devil tricks everybody into doing these things like divorce or adultery. Now they're all justified. You can go to communion for adultery. You can go to communion for anything.
Yeah, maybe the devil's tricking all of us, and it's silly to get married. I mean, I totally think that's could be possible.
It's not silly. You just the problem is we're in the Wild West right now. It's kind of like, I guess, back when the Visigoths were running around, they had to come up with their own monastery, so they started civilization with Saint Ignatius or whatever, whoever. They just started a monastery, and that's where Christendom in Europe came from, right? We have to start marriage and define it and own it and do it. And the bishops are all messed up on this, so they're not going to give us any help. But marriage is good. Marriage should be pursued, but you got to define it. And if you're wondering what it is, anything before 1950, that's the definition. Go with that. And realize that your priest, your marriage prep person, even your FSSP priest, and the bishop aren't going to get it. There's one guy I know who's pretty good, but actually a couple, but pretty much their hands are tied because the bishop, man. It's kind of like shh. So right now, what's loud and proud is the Christopher West bandwagon. That's where all the power goes. So everyone's like, dude, we got to work on our chemistry. Why don't we have a 10-year marriage prep and really get into our chemistry and whatever?
I'm all fine getting kneecapping Christopher West. The problem, where you and I disagree, is I don't think the solution is to go back to the way things were. I think we need.
What is the solution?
I think get rid of some more of this sort of antiquated fears about the body and sexuality and pleasure and things like that.
Okay, antiquated fears don't sound good, and it doesn't matter if they're new fears or old fears, but truth does. And God is antiquated, but God doesn't change, and neither does nature or truth. So it doesn't matter how old it is.
But the people that came up with these things were not God.
The people who came up with these things are God, per the Bible. God wrote the Bible, and that's where it's from. And that God started the church to be, and it's infallible. So you want to know what God thinks? Whatever the church teaches. Vatican II is not church teaching. It's a pastoral meeting of words that's not infallible. That's what Paul VI came out and said it. He goes, by the way, all this great stuff that really looked cool isn't binding. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. And so that's the solution. But if all these marriage rules are just man-made, as you contend, then yeah, we're smarter now. Bloodletting, that's a man-made solution. That's antiquated. We don't do that anymore. We're smarter. But that's just like science stuff. We're talking human nature, morality, truth, natural law never changes.
Yeah, well, see here, this is where I think the lines get blurry, because we are talking about biological realities that have taken on moral implications that it's not always obvious how they did or why they did.
Okay, so whether or not it's obvious is secondary. God said it, we do it. And faith comes through believing first. You don't wait till you believe to have faith. You do it. That's why I say jump off the cliff into the dark fog with God. Now, what does God want? What does the church say? Okay? And if Vatican II in its teaching contradicts what came before it, it's not correct. P.S. They never said it was absolutely correct. They just said it's a great thing, and you got to love us, man. And that's not good enough, but a lot of people like it. And Christopher West just set up shop, is going to town. So that's why I kind of criticize the uncharted Catholic part. Catholicism is charted, and you conform to it and get grace, and that's where you blossom. If you're fighting it, dude, you can't get anywhere, and it gets frustrating. And that's where I kind of see you are. You're sort of I think you. If NFP is natural and correct, then what came before it is up for grabs, and that's where we're at. That's like saying if evolution is true or long ages is true, then the Bible is up for grabs, and this is all a human thing, and we just then we're all Protestant. You have your feeling of the Bible, I have my Bible. We're just going to all get along and just be nice. And, God is love, and we can all agree on that, so let's have a party. You can't do that. And if one gets involved in sin or their own ego too much, they're happy to jettison the past because that's where truth is. So I think it was prophesied, like Our Lady of La Salette or whatever. She's like, in the latter half of the 20th century, stuff's going to go out the window. And that's exactly what's going on. God's not going to allow this forever. All this abortion, all this divorce, all this NFP, no, all this Novus Ordo, it's going to die. It's going to go away.
You sound like a sedevacantist.
I may sound like all sorts of stuff, but no, Pope Francis is Pope. I go to Novus Ordo every day. And I go to FSSP on Sunday.
Well, I'm going to wrap up here.
Yeah,
Here's what
I'll bet.
I
got to go work tonight, man. I got a bunch of work to do.
Oh my gosh. Well, I need to try and get to bed, but all I'll say is this. I mean, I'm sure I sound like a squeaky wheel. I mean, I don't claim to have all the answers, and I don't claim to be the best guy. I mean, I'm pretty transparently not the best person. Like I struggle with stuff, and I wish, like there was a time in my life when I could do what you say is just substitute my will and intellect for whatever the church says. I find I'm just not able to do that right now. It's not for a lack of effort. It's just there are things that
what you pray for, you will get. And if you tell God, I'll do whatever you want, and God, the church is not elusive. It's not rocket science. You just have to identify it and do it. And that's the choice everyone has.
And if I pray and nothing changes, it's still
you never stop praying. You prayed to your dead, and you have to have humility and obedience, or you get lost. You have to. And so this is where this stuff gets pointed out. Like I'm trying to point some of these things out to you. But again, it's the struggle everyone has, and people go through seasons and times and all that. It's got the key thing is just you can never give up. And you just always do good spiritual reading, like, Imitation of Christ, and you definitely do a rosary every day, right? Yeah. You do the rosary every day, you'll get straightened out. If you're sincere, you will. You never take your scapular off, you'll get straightened out. Everyone in heaven has the exact same belief about NFP, divorce, everything. Everyone's exactly the same. Heaven starts now. This is why Catholics cannot agree to disagree. There's no such thing as a cafeteria Catholic.
What if you're wrong about NFP? Does that mean you won't be in heaven?
I'm following my conscience, and if I'm wrong, which I don't think I am, then someone's got to show it to me. And if, again, there can be some Protestants in heaven who are sincere, but they just haven't been able to get it all together by the time they die. But there can be, they probably got in purgatory a long time because no one's praying for them. But you do what you can. But if you find yourself becoming a scoffer or hostile or closed-minded to a giant pile of saint quotes and pope quotes and catechism that says procreation is prime, it's like. So I don't know what to say, I guess, on that. It's hard. You can't just argue your way into having everyone change religions, and some people won't or whatever. But as long as you are always looking and trying, the Catholic Church makes sense. You said some things. I'm not the best guy. I'm not this. I'm not that. Join the club, okay? But you also said, I don't pretend to have all the answers, or I don't know all the answers. Well, I guess I'm saying I do, because I can see what the church teaches and says. So it's no confusion on what it is. So that's why I pointed out, and I've kind of taken to YouTube, because you can only go on Facebook so long and no one listens anyway. I'm super blocked, dude. Everybody. Anyway. All right. Well, I guess we have talked enough. Go ahead.
I mean, I appreciate you coming on. I hope that the fact that I enjoy these conversations. I think I'm sincere in my desire to learn and hear viewpoints. That's why I have you on. I have other people on, and I am genuinely trying, if not for myself, for my kids that are going to get married, and I genuinely don't want my kids
they'll
to
get
go
married.
through
They're
what
going to want to get married, yes, and
I don't want my kids to go through what I've gone through. So
then okay, yeah. So the better thing is you introduce them to the marriage contract and the terms. Otherwise, anything's possible, and they might just go through what you've gone through or worse. And I heard a good quote the other day: divorce and marriage go hand in hand today. That's true. This is why we've got to get to the contract and the consequences for violating it. And you're not going to get that information from your pastor or Christopher West or Vatican II. You have to go back. It's not that Vatican II says a bunch of bad stuff, but they do say some things that are just kind of weird, and they're not congruent with what came before it. So it's a what do you call it? What do you call those councils? They're when you have a church council, what's it called? A ecumenical council. Oh. It's ecumenical, but it was declared not infallible, and there's no new anathemas. In other words. All right. Well, let us wrap up, and then you'll probably come up with some questions later, and I'll zap you on Twitter or whatever.
Okay, that sounds good.
God bless.
Thanks, John. Have a good night.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.